A little bit different each time. Hopefully this is taping. Hello, hello, hello. The masked man is speaking to you. As we wait for the artist, we're talking a little bit about the idea of the holy bloodline, right? And in Latin, holy grail is san grail, but if you move the G, you get sang graal, which means holy blood. And this idea is that the holy grail is a code for the secret bloodline of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, passing down through the Merovingians and all the way up. That's what's behind the Da Vinci Code, but people have been talking about that for a long time. Dan Brown didn't make that idea up. He just kind of popularized this idea. But I think it's important because, as we saw in the Silmarillion, so much of it rests on... Are they opening? Maybe that's the artist trying to get in. That one's locked too. You have to go to that one. Very strange. They always like lock themselves. Keep going. They have to go to the next one. maybe we'll find artists plural. We'll see. Let's see if it's what do they call that? Artist collective. An artist collective. You know, and they have the commune get together and stuff. They're walking slow. Let's see if they can find it. Oh, okay. See, that sounds like a group. Sounds like it's being led by Clinton. Here they come.
There's a third door.
Here they come. Sounds like Mardi Gras. Hey, come on in. You guys all go out to eat together? That's what I figured. Come on in. There's the man. I gotta get that painting. Great. Looking forward to that. They're coming. Where'd you guys all go eat? Where? Oh, you didn't go with? Oh. I'm not with these guys. People judge you by the company you keep, Chris. You gotta watch out. You know? The artists come. Chris has come, but he's not admitting any association with the other ones. So we'll see. I saw Rob, and I saw Clinton. Was Amanda with him?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't see Amanda. Okay. And Paula said she might not be able to come. She's been a little under the weather, so we'll see. Well, we're not doing it. It's just there's something about this room that the doors. I don't know if I can figure it out. There's something in here. It's hard to figure out how to do it. I think you might actually need a key to do it.
Oh, okay.
I remember, we always have problems in this room. You see it fixed. Sometimes we're completely locked out. Figure out how to unlock this door, but it stays locked. Hey, that one's unlocked.
I have
Cheater girl. Did you guys all go out to eat? Like, so you all came at the same time? You just converge. There we go. There's another one. Yay! Oh, Lupe, you're joining us today.
No, I'm just going to say.
Oh, come say hello. That's good. It's always good to say hello. This guy's moving in hefty circles. You know, heady circles now. Your work is just getting out there. Good stuff. Are you in the classroom over at Shoreside?
No, I'm at Bel Air now.
Oh, that's right. Is Bel Air meeting? Is Bel Air meeting in person?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
It's minimal. I have maybe like 10 students in person total.
Okay. Oh boy. So they're letting them choose basically.
Yeah. And for the most part, most of the tickets are doing well online. So most of them are not in person.
It's crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. Man. Okay. That's exactly what we're talking in. And, yeah, you just gotta keep an eye on these guys.
Yeah.
Just sit by now and then.
Yeah. I'll come by for the midterm presentations. And then...
Oh, good. Yeah. Okay, it's in 2 weeks. The first one is in 2 weeks. Yeah.
Wow.
And you're no, not you. Don't worry. You're not still. Your essay is still a month off. You guys have. Yeah. I think it's what 1. Yeah, it's 4 weeks off. These guys are going to get started in 2 weeks. I want to see. Well, Chris, you already said you're interested in using maps. You know, I wonder if we misunderstood when you emailed me. You were saying Mordor, but were you actually thinking of Thangora Dream, where...
No, where where the
Were you thinking of Morgoth or where Sauron is?
where,
Because in the movie, Sauron is in Mordor.
okay.
But the Silmarillion, the part I told you about, that's not a movie, that's called Thangora Dream.
No, I'm talking about where they was burning the trees and the trees came and turned it over.
Oh!
Where the eye is at.
Oh, yeah, that's Mordor. That's Mordor, so that's towards the end of your book, those maps.
Okay.
It's good stuff. You said the eye as Clinton walked in. He could be the eye of Sauron.
No problem.
Yeah, back here. And then Mordor's going to be towards the end. It just keeps narrowing and narrowing. So that's Mordor. And then here is even bigger.
Where the eye was at.
Oh, the eye is...
Where it was burning everything.
Yeah, see, this is Barad-dûr and Dark Tower. That's where the eye is. And that's Mount Doom. Mount Doom is where they throw the ring in at the end. They're very close to each other. And that's the tower with the eye.
Where the trees came and they...
Oh, you're thinking about the trees. The trees is Isengard. That's Orphan. Yeah, so that's in a different place. Isengard is here, and Mordor is over there. And then Helm's Deep, where they have the big battle, is down along here. Yeah, but that's Isengard.
Mordor, this is where...
Yeah, Mordor is where Sauron is. Isengard, or Orphan, is where Saruman is, the magician that goes bad.
And what did they do? What did they have the eyes? Where they were building the orcs? Where they were making the orcs?
Oh, that's also Isengard. Yeah, where they're making those down in the deep pits. They're making that's all happening in Isengard. We don't actually really see the Dark Tower except for the line. We don't like really. Well, I guess in the very beginning, we see Gollum being tortured in the very, very beginning. That's supposed to be the Dark Tower, but we don't really see much of it other than that. But yeah, we don't, even in the novels, we don't really go into the Dark Tower. Because the Dark Tower is a little ways away from Mount Doom. Mount Doom, and over there is the Dark Tower, Barad-dûr.
I have to start with a confession. I left my book on my desk at work.
Oh, boy, okay, well, that's okay. You can read it. And Lupe will join us someday. In 2 weeks. Your first thing is in 2 weeks, so he's going to come and have fun. Laugh a little bit. That's your expense.
I feel like this is like a cheat sheet.
Well, this is it. I put this together for you.
I feel like I'm pulling this out of my sleeve.
That's it. No, it's great. This is, like you have the high school teacher where it says you're allowed to have one cheat sheet that's like one page, and then these people like put microscopic letters. Don't worry, Anthony and Paula, we're just jumping around here. People come in. Yeah, Paul is. This is not doing too. We almost got everybody. Okay, good stuff.
Still people stuff? Why take the horse like that? Maybe they gave it to you. I can look for you. Maybe they gave it.
Amanda, you're pretty brave, sitting right next to Clinton. Okay, good. Yeah, because Paul is probably not going to come today, so you have to keep him in line. That's your job. That's kind of a group job. Yeah. It is. Clinton, you want to give a shout out to Anthony? He'll be watching this later.
Yes. Sumer, you suck!
Oh, man, here we go. I mean, I don't know. Anthony had mentioned, should we zoom him in? And that's kind of like multitasking. I don't know. We can maybe try to figure that out. I don't know. So I can watch it live. I don't know. I've not done that. It's like a little bit too multitasking for old men. That's actually what I did at home. It took a long time. Oh my gosh, a long time.
Anthony, Sumer, and I are very good friends.
Yeah, there we go.
It's all in good fun that I say these awful things about them.
Look at this, Anthony. He's look at it. He's making his confession. Unless you,
Yeah, right?
he's getting too nice. It's like he's getting them fattened up for the kill. Unless they're frenemies right there.
Ooh, frenemies.
Robert, man, that beard, it's getting there. It's good stuff. You want to be a dwarf? It's because you want to be a dwarf. We're gonna call you Gimli. There we go. Gimli. Oh my gosh. Well, anyway, as everybody was coming in, we're talking about that. What's really ironic is this Dan Brown guy has this whole royal bloodline idea of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, but actually the concept of the royal bloodline is incredibly important in the Bible, isn't it? right? What's the royal bloodline in the Bible, if you think about it, Old Testament particularly? That's it? Yeah, it's the line of David that's going to end with Jesus, the Messiah, right? And really, if you think about it, much of Genesis is almost like God having to protect the royal bloodline that's going to go from Abraham through through Judah, on to David, and all the way to Solomon, and all the way on to Jesus. And if you think about it, it goes from Abraham to Isaac. What can you tell me about Isaac? Wasn't that kind of a miraculous birth? Remember, Abraham and Sarah were too old. Okay, there's Isaac. Okay, then we move on through. Okay, then now here's the big question. Okay, Judah. Most people know that Judah's in the Messianic line because one of Jesus's titles is the Lion of Judah. Okay, now here let's see, Bill. I'm going to test you. Who is Judah's mother? Oh my God! Look at you guys! Failing Bible 101. It's a hard question, but okay. Well, who's Judah's father? Jacob. Okay, good. Jacob, because the 12 sons of Jacob become the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay, so his father is Jacob, but who's his mother? Okay. Oh, see, that's the see.
Judah. No. It's the older.
Rachel had two sons.
The one that really looked at
Leah, thank you. Okay, Rachel had two sons named Benjamin and Judah. Right? I'm sorry, Benjamin and Joseph, the ones he loved. Okay, now why am I bringing this up? Okay, the mother of the Messianic line, Leah, is the woman that Jacob didn't love and was actually fooled. See? Good, he was tricked into marrying her, remember? He thought he was marrying Rachel, and he ended up marrying Leah with the weak eyes, whatever that means. It makes all the girls like, I hope not have weak eyes. Right? But she's the one that had 6 sons, right? And then 2, and the other 2 handmaidens got 2 each. But what I'm saying is that we don't normally think about it this way, but here's the bloodline, okay, that it goes through. Now, somebody already mentioned the other crazy one. Judah, okay, how did it pass down from Judah? When Judah had a child with, basically his daughter-in-law, okay? And why does he sleep with his daughter-in-law? Because what does she do? She goes and fools him because he was not being righteous to her and giving another son, that whole levirate vow and stuff like that. But what I'm saying is, these are crazy things. Somebody mentioned Rahab. Rahab the harlot is part of the line, okay? These women of suspect sexuality. And Ruth herself, who had to, throw herself a little bit at, Ruth is basically a girl at HBU. There's no guys here, so you've got to, there you go. You got one, you found one. That's That's right. So, it's just amazing now, okay? David, the Messianic line goes from David down through Solomon. Who's Solomon's mother? Bathsheba, okay? Now, Bathsheba's first son died, right? But the second one, right? And so, my reading of it is that David was intended to marry Bathsheba, right? But instead, he committed adultery and then had the husband. My guess is that Uriah would have died in that war anyway. He was a super soldier, rushing forward, right? As far as he knew, he died a hero's death. He had no idea that he was being betrayed because everybody just pulled back. Nobody betrayed him in the sense of taking a sword away. They just pulled back and they weren't there. And a soldier like Uriah doesn't look back. Right, goes forward. So what I'm saying is, it's sort of like, and I'm sure Tolkien partly has it in mind, in Lord of the Rings, the sacred bloodline, okay, that leads down, and you can see it a little bit better over here, on the bottom right corner. You see, remember we said that Eärendil, the one with the starboat, and Elwing are the parents of Elrond and Elros. Does anybody remember what choice Elrond and Elros were given? Yeah, will they be mortal or elf? Notice Elrond is sometimes called Elrond half-elven, right? And remember, Elrond chooses elfdom, and he's the father of Arwen. Elros chooses to be mortal, becomes the first king of Numenor, and like you said, through thousands of, not thousands, but 100 generations, thousands of years, comes down to Aragorn. And so, and remember, you don't get Arwen and Aragorn unless you have two man-elf minglings, right? You need Beren and Luthien, but you also need Tuor and Idril that are on there. And actually, you could even argue it goes farther back because Thingol actually marries a Maiar, basically an angel, right? A Melian, the woman with the girdle. So, I think there's some truth to this idea of God working through families, passing it down, generation after generation, and all of this. And so that's at the center. But I just added a bunch of other names if you want. I put in the four major Valar there: Manwë, Aule, Ulmo, Melkor. If you just want to have a lot of the different names, this is a great cheat sheet. I'm not going to actually test you on names. It'll be more essay stuff. But it'd be fun. It'd be good to do it. And cool. So one of these days I'll bring it in. My daughter, my son, they dated. They ended up not getting married, but they were pretty serious for a while. She took my class, and she and her friend made a beautiful bloodline, timeline, all the way down. I'll see if I can find it. I'll bring it. It's just beautiful the way they did it. It's very artistic. But anyway, so you got this. You can always just find it. Did everybody get one? I think all right. Man, this is so much fun. First of all, again, artists, 2 weeks is your first thing. Some of you had some ideas? Well, I think Anthony might do the crown, he said. The crown of Morgoth. He said something about the crown of Morgoth. Remember I mentioned that to him? He said he might do it. With the Silmarils in there. There we go. Yep, sacred geometry. See, good stuff. And maps, and like you said, whatever you want to do, but if you want to pull in the Silmarillion, that would be really cool. You could do something with Beren and Luthien, Amanda? Maybe when Beren sees Luthien singing and dancing under the trees, I can sort of see that collage. Beautiful stuff. With the light coming out of her. Beautiful stuff. Trees on with trees, okay. And I don't know what birds Paul is going to choose, but there'll be some birds in there. The eagles will come to the rescue. What's that? She said she wasn't feeling well. So she said she might or may not make it. We'll see. Oh man, there you go. Did you catch that one, Paul? So, all right. Let me just kind of go over the Hobbit, so we can then get to the Lord of the Rings. And again, if you get your handout, it's the page. What was it? Is it 9? Right, yeah, because it was 5, 6, 7, and 8 were the Silmarillion, and then it's page 9 and 10. I just try to synthesize. I'm like that. Maybe that's anal retention. It's very mathematical. It's like I give myself 2 pages and that's it. I can't go past the borders. That's good. So I got what I could fit in there for 2 pages. And how many of you actually read The Hobbit? Like maybe when you were a kid? Are you familiar with The Hobbit? Any of you see the movies or anything like that? The first movie of the 3 is pretty close. And then it just gets wilder and wilder and wilder until the battle. What is it? The Battle of 5 Armies. One critic said the real title should not have been the Battle of the 5 Armies. It should have been the Bloating of the 5 Pages. Basically, let's take a 5 page and just blow it up into a 3-hour movie and stuff. But until then, but just to kind of go over, okay, it's amazing that the Hobbit follows, or I guess you should say the Lord of the Rings, is going to follow almost the same geography, the same movement. And in fact, just to show you, like I said, I'm going to go too much into it, but if you turn to the back of your book, you'll see all the maps. I kind of sent you some of these too, but just to kind of give you an idea as we prepare for the Lord of the Rings, it's amazing how similar the journey is in the beginning of Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. And does anybody know what the subtitle of The Hobbit is? That's the movie. But what about the book? You're right, it is. There and Back Again. Okay? There and Back Again. It's a there and back again story. And actually, Lord of the Rings is a there and back again story too. It ends where it began in the Shire, but Frodo's going to be much more sort of damaged than Bilbo. It's going to be much more of a harrowing experience. But both things. Okay, The Hobbit begins in the Shire, right there in the upper right. Upper right quadrant. You see where the Shire is. Okay, and then he's going to go from the Shire and he's going to go across to Rivendell. Okay, so that's going to be the beginning of the journey. And of course, in Lord of the Rings, it's going to take a lot longer. and he's going to stop at that place called Bree and other things. But it's the same basic thing. We're going to go along the sort of east-west road, and we're going to make our way to Rivendell, which is the last homely house, between the mountains and the sea. And after Rivendell, then they're going to leave, and you see those are the mountains. They're called the Misty Mountains. And in The Hobbit, they're going to try to go over the mountain, but they're going to be stopped, and so they're going to have to go under the mountain instead. That's exactly the same thing that's going to happen in The Hobbit. When they're forced to go under the mountain, that's when they meet the goblins. They're called goblins in The Hobbit. They will be called orcs in Lord of the Rings. They are ultimately the same. They're just scarier when they become orcs, but they're the same. And in The Hobbit, it is when he goes under the Misty Mountain, he escapes, he falls down, and that's where he meets Gollum, and that's where he gets the ring. And that kind of story is retold by Gandalf in Chapter 2, the past, Shadow of the Past. And there's that whole riddle game, but it's all taking place under the Misty Mountains. Then they escape from the Misty Mountains, and they come out, and eventually they will find their way to a forest, the Forest of Murkwood. In Lord of the Rings, it's going to start... Go ahead.
Led Zeppelin has a song.
Oh, really? And there's a pretty good song in the beginning of the first Hobbit movie, on what is Beneath the Misty Mountain. It's like super low, that song they sing.
Is this the same thing as Misty Mountain?
Oh, really?
I know the Led Zeppelin song is basically from Lord of the Rings.
By the way, I don't know if you know this, but do you know what rock group wanted to make like an animated version of Lord of the Rings with themselves in it? It's actually the Beatles, yeah. They get a great trivia. It didn't happen, but they wanted to. It was kind of funny. Anyway, I guess they must have made a Yellow Submarine instead. I don't know, which is kind of a cool movie. It's got blue meanies in it that are pretty scary. But anyway, but in The Hobbit, we're going to go straight across to Murkwood, and we're not even going to see Murkwood in Lord of the Rings. We'll hear about it. But instead, they're going to go down to that little forest, which is Lorien. That's where they're going to meet Galadriel. But it's just interesting that we're following the same... And that's what's kind of cool. If you've seen Star Wars 4, 5, and 6, right? 4 and 6 follow the same kind of trajectory, where you begin in Tatooine, you escape, you go over here, you blow up a Death Star, and you come back. It's like it follows the same sort of geographical journey, which is kind of neat. But anyway, now... And then, even there's a little bit similarity, because after they go to Murkwood, eventually they're going to find themselves over, that's the Lonely Mountain in this small map here, but there's going to be something they call the Desolation of Smog, which is one of the subtitles of the movie. In other words, they're going to find a place that's been sort of destroyed. Well, eventually they're going to go to Mordor in Lord of the Rings and find a place that's destroyed. So it's just kind of neat that we have a similar looping journey. Right? And again, in The Hobbit, basically, under the Misty Mountains, he meets Gollum, he gets the ring. We have no idea that it's going to be evil, because Tolkien didn't know it was going to be evil when he wrote The Hobbit. It's just an invisibility ring. And then they escape, and then it's out of the frying pan and into the fire is the name of the chapter, because then they're attacked by these goblins and wargs and stuff like that, those wolf things. But they escape. And they spend a day, they find, just like Rivendell is a safe haven, after they're attacked by goblins and attacked by the wolves and stuff, then they find another safe haven. Anybody know with whom? His name? Bjorn, okay? Bjorn, who is sort of shapeshifter, or skin changer. He's a man and a bear. He goes back and forth as a man and a bear. And he takes care of bees, right? And the movie shows the big bees, right? And,
my favorite part of the book.
Oh, yeah?
Ruined it.
Oh, they ruined it, see? It's interesting, there's a little bit of a moral part of that story, too, because in the book, he gives them the ponies, but he's like, you have to return these. And he's like watching them. There's a little more of a sort of moral edge there, right? And it's a little bit fun with Beorn, because Beowulf, you know what Beowulf means? It almost looks the same in English. It means bee-wolf or bee hunter. And who or what hunts bees? Bears, right? As we all know, Winnie the Pooh. So Beowulf, there's a little joke with Beorn going back to Beowulf, because he is a bear. Right? So he's playing with language a lot in Tolkien. Right? He loves the word games and stuff like that. I don't think he would have been one of those annoying punsters. When you give your sermons, Bill, are you a punster? Or not too much?
No.
Not too much? Okay. Like the preacher that gives a sermon and has to use like 7 different puns based on like fishing or whatever it happens to be, and they just keep running it along and all that. Anyway, crazy. So, and then after that, they go into Murkwood, and in the Hobbit now, and that's where they are attacked by the giant spider. Well, they're not necessarily giant, fairly big spiders, not as big as Sheila, but they're attacked by spiders and all that sort of stuff. And that's when Bilbo gets brave and he stabs one. And then they escape there and they go on to Lake Town. And again, they find a celebration at Lake Town, but then they've got to fight the dragon and all that sort of stuff. And again, this is a basic thing, but what I want to do, and this the reason I put this together, is just to give you some of the major themes of The Hobbit that will be sort of reflected and expanded upon in The Lord of the Rings. We don't have time to spend a whole day or two on that. So, as I mentioned, I won't read it to you, but as I mentioned in the first paragraph there, Bilbo is an unlikely hero. Why is Bilbo an unlikely hero for this journey? He's a hobbit, but what else is he like? Homie, hey. We call him bourgeois. They used to use the word petty bourgeois. Small, lower middle class guy, a little clerk. Okay, he just has his own little world. Everything's neat. Okay, he's got his handkerchiefs and he's got his beautiful tea set and all of that stuff, and everything is nice and orderly. He lives in a beautiful, clean hole in the ground. Right, and everything's in order. Let's leave it like that. He's like the last person you would expect to go on an adventure. He's more of a grocer. Okay? Have you ever heard? I think it was Napoleon first, and then maybe Hitler accused England of being a what? Have you ever heard the famous phrase? A nation. Have you ever heard it? A nation of shopkeepers. You ever heard that? And of course, the British turned out to be pretty brave and resilient. I mean, they were holding off Hitler by themselves before we got in. It's unbelievable that little island did. And really, the hobbits are the British, where they can be, very petty and they can have their, self-satisfied. But when they have to fight, they can be tough as tree roots, as we'll see, right? Soft as butter, but as tough as tree roots, as Gandalf will say about them. So Bilbo is, and again, there are no hobbits of any kind in the Silmarillion, right? But here, it was the love of the hobbits. And we said before, the beauty of Lord of the Rings is it's taking the high, serious epicness of the Silmarillion and mixing it together with a little bit more lighthearted Hobbit lore, and we've got this perfect fusion. And just so you know, when they made the movie of the Lord of the Rings, they injected a lot more humor than is actually in the book. There is some humor in the book, but they made it a little bit lighter at parts and a little more humor. But when they did the Hobbit movies, they tried to make it a little bit darker. So they were trying to kind of meet in the middle anyway, the movie makers, to do that. Add a little gravitas to the... And I love The Hobbit, but I'm sorry, those 13 dwarves are like indistinguishable from each other. And they really tried hard in the movie to give them all different beards and hair and stuff like that and try to... But they're just a bunch of... And they've also got silly names, which he stole from I think it's the Poetic Edda. He just took them right out of there. And there was a bunch of elves, and one of them is named Gandalf, too, by the way. It's weird, like, if you read The Hobbit again, you're going to realize that the names are nowhere near as serious as they are in Lord of the Rings. They're more fun names, and places are called... Like even the beginning of the Lord of the Rings, they visit the Old Forest. That's like a allegorical name. But then later we meet Lothlorien and Fangorn. I mean, Tolkien himself is really injecting the full language. So we move away from, again, just sort of allegorical, fun, like names you would see in Pilgrim's Progress, to names that are actually names that are part of a language, that are systematic. See it moving up. But anyway, he should just be a grocer, and yet he proves to be really, really brave, right? He moves away from his creature comforts, okay? When he leaves in a hurry, does anybody remember what he leaves behind, if you know The Hobbit? His handkerchief, right? And the movie does a nice job with like, oh, he lost his hanky, and one of the dwarves, rips off this, nasty, dirty thing and throws it to him. There you go. It's like, right? But he's got to learn. He's got to rough it. Right? He's got to show that he's strong. He proves to be strong, much better than any of the elves. I mean, any of the dwarves. Anyway, now I'll just give you one of my favorite quotes. It's paragraph 2. Though he's timid, there's a longing within Bilbo for adventure. This is early in the book. It says, as the dwarves are singing, as they sang, the Hobbit felt the love of beautiful things made by hands and by cunning and by magic moving through him. A fierce and jealous love, the desire of the hearts of the dwarves. Then something Tookish woke up in him. That's the other side of the family. Something Tookish woke up inside him, and he wished to go and see the great mountains, and hear the pine trees and the waterfalls, and explore the caves, and wear a sword instead of a walking stick. You ever feel that desire waking up in you? How's your novel coming, Clinton? Is he still on the bus? He's moved on.
He's moved on.
Okay, you left him in the bus when I saw.
He's already found 2 parts.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so he's on a roll. He's been writing a fantasy novel.
There's
No waterfall. Okay. Have any of you just felt the need? I've just got to go to Colorado, see mountains. You're up in the mountains or no? Where you are? There are mountains in Kentucky, right? Yeah. Just miss the mountains. Of course, the Kentucky mountains are not as high as Colorado, right? Or are they that high? Yeah, I don't think they're as high, right? They're a little bit more human, shall we say? Yeah. Yeah, that's a full mile. The Mile High City, you know what they call it? Yeah, full mile up there. 5,280. How they came up with that is mind-boggling, especially for a mathematician. It is mind-boggling. I still do not want the metric system, but how could you possibly do science with our system? It's insane. Oh man, metric system. Crazy. The British were holding out, but they gave in. The Canadians gave in. Everybody. I think we're the only ones left. Are we the only one left that doesn't use them? What about the Australians? Do they use the metric system too now, or do they? Listen, when I was a kid, they were telling us, got to learn the metric system. Everybody's going to be using it. They're still not using it, so except in science. But anyway, so this yearning, this desire to go on an adventure, right? It's a deep, again, archetypal thing. We're all heroes and heroines at the core. We just don't know it. We're waiting to go on that journey, and something wakes up in him. If you really know your Tolkien lore, it's just mentioned briefly in The Lord of the Rings. The idea is, as soon as the elves go to the ocean and hear the seagulls and see the water, it makes a yearning, and sooner or later they're going to go to the Grey Havens and take the ship back to Valinor. Right? It's just something wakes up in them when they see that. Now, did any of you like literally just completely grow up in Houston and didn't actually see a mountain until you were a bit older? Was that an amazing experience? Do you remember it? I mean, it's just beautiful. It's just an amazing thing. And so this is it, that sense of, C.S. Lewis would call it joy, that desire that impels of. Those of you that are familiar with Voyage of the Dawn Treader, Reepicheep, the mouse, has this yearning, this desire to go to Aslan's country. Whatever it takes, he's going to follow that desire. And so that's something that wakes up in Bilbo, and it will later wake up in Frodo, his nephew Frodo. It will wake up in him as well. Look at number 3. How many of you have actually read Pilgrim's Progress? You read that? This one? Heard of it? You read it? Okay. This is true of Pilgrim's Progress, but it's often true of books that are about being a pilgrim. Right? That it's a hard road, but you're always going to find a place of rest. It's the Delectable Mountains or something. Christian in Pilgrim's Progress is always finding places to stop. Even in Wizard of Oz, remember they stop at the Emerald City and they get their hair done and stuff like that. You remember that? It's like they've actually walked into MGM to the studio where they do the makeup for the stars. It's almost, I think that's what they were doing. In fact, that's probably where it was filmed. But that there's always a rest area to refresh us. And there's several places where they're refreshed. In Lord of the Rings, it will be Rivendell, but it will be Lorien as well. Places where we stop and are refueled. There's something, because in a sense, we're all pilgrims on the road. Can anybody name for me any works of literature that are based around being on the road, on a journey, a pilgrimage? We already mentioned Pilgrim's Progress. Anybody think of others? Good, Canterbury Tales, very good. They are literally pilgrims going to Canterbury to visit the relics of Thomas a Becket. who was killed by Henry II. Right? And they're going, and as they go, they tell their story. So Canterbury Tales is, one of the, in English, it's like the first great pilgrimage story. Can you think of any others? Where we're on the road as pilgrims, where we're journeying? Which of the Homer books is about a journey? The Odyssey, okay? Not so much the Iliad, but the Odyssey is, and he has many rest areas, usually with beautiful goddesses, but anyway, has many rest areas as he goes along. The Aeneid is also partly about a journey, being on the road. Can you think of any famous American novels? One about a young boy that takes to the road, except the road happens to be made out of water. Huckleberry Finn, okay, a little Tom Sawyer, a little bit less, but particularly Huck Finn, one of the key sort of American. Moby Dick is a journey, right? A lot of Hollywood movies used to be road pictures, we called them, where you go on the road and you learn and you change as you go forward like that. To me, it's a wonderful metaphor for life. We're all tourists, right? We're all, Chris, you must know this word. What's the beautiful King James word for a pilgrim? It starts with the letter S. We're all what? I'm sure you've heard this word. We're all sojourners. You ever heard that word? That's a beautiful word. We're all sojourners. We're all pilgrims on the road. And I don't know if you notice it, but when you read Lord of the Ring, I might have missed a few, but basically every time Tolkien mentions the road, it's capitalized. Because it is kind of a character in all of Tolkien, especially when we get to Lord of the Rings, but even in The Hobbit. The road sweeps you along, right? Listen. The road goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began. Now far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow if I can, pursuing it with eager feet until it joins some larger way, where many paths and errands meet, and whither then I cannot say. There's only one road, and it's like a mighty river. Its springs are at every doorstep, and every path is its tributary. It's a dangerous business going out your door. You step into the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there's no knowing where you might be swept off to. That's what it's all about. Right? Beautiful. When we went through Colorado, when the kids were young, we'd be marching forward, and they'd say, the road goes ever on, and they would respond, down from the door, and we'd just march on like that. So they're good. When they're young, they can memorize anything. Right? You keep going, you keep going. And that's what it is a river. And my son went to HSPBA and he was the valedictorian, so he got to give the speech. And in his speech he quoted, "It's a dangerous business going out your door." In fact, he said, as a wise old Hobbit once said, and he quoted, so I was very, very proud. But that's what it's about. It's about, and that's kind of a Christian. What books in the Bible are very much on the road? You think of any books in the Bible that would fit that? Say again? The Exodus, second book of Exodus, okay? Literally, I mean, Exodus means the road out, is what it means in Greek. It's the road out, the way out. They're on the road. Any other books? Good. He is, and the book of Acts. Good. So Jesus and the disciples are always on the road. They're moving back and forth. It's not a huge area. But then Acts, you might remember the calculation of how much Paul traveled. It's like 10,000 miles or something. If you put together all the journeys, there was missionary journeys along the road, sometimes on the ship, but usually on foot, on the roads, right? Is it something like 10,000? It's a huge number. It's unbelievable. And so yeah, Acts is very much on the road. Okay, we're moving. We are, and you know, like I said, the Bible talks about us as pilgrims, right? And we're looking for the city, right? And we haven't got there. Abraham, all the patriarchs in a way are on the road, right? They were nomadic in many ways before they settled down and got the Holy Land, right? Because they don't get the Holy Land until, really, the book of Joshua. Really, they don't get it until then. So But again, we're moving along this route. We're going on a quest. We're trying to discover something. And one of the neatest things in Lord of the Rings is when he realizes the difference is Bilbo went to find something, the treasure of the gold. Frodo went to lose something. Very strange, very maybe unique in some ways, maybe unique in this history, that I'm going to leave something behind and come back. Just amazing, but it's that, and we always end up where we began, but on a higher level. Some of you have had me before. I like to draw this picture, this diagram, we start somewhere and we end where we began, but we're on a higher level. So God brought Abraham and said, I will give you the promised land. And Abraham was actually in the promised land when God said, I will give it to you. But first, Abraham and his people had to descend, literally, to Egypt, which is south, into slavery. Then there's the Exodus. They come around. And do you know when Joshua says, choose this day whom you will serve, but we will serve the Lord, right? That'll be your house in June. Or apartment, if you're ready for a house yet. A one-room apartment or something. But you got to suffer together. That's good. I don't, a lot of these, kids say, I sound like an old man. Like I say, I'm an old man. It's like, we can't get married until we've got lots of money and we're, no. Work together, suffer together. That's the whole point, I mean, it's amazing to say I'm going to be financially, independent before I get married. Okay, well, get married when you're 50. Okay, have fun having kids. Okay, I just it's crazy. Go to suffer together, right? What was it? So I forgot what he said. Oh, wait, making house. All right, well, I have to trace back the road. Thank you. Higher plane. Where is he? When he says, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, he's under that great tree, which is the same place where God gave one of his promises to Abraham. Full circle, right? We, in the Bible, started in the Garden of Eden. We fell, and where are we going to end up at the very end? In a place called the what? At the very end, in Revelation. We will end up in the New Jerusalem. Right? I mean, the new heaven and earth, but the New Jerusalem. And the New Jerusalem is like the Garden of Eden, but much, much better. Right? Partly because we know all the suffering we've done to get there. So we're back where we started, but we've matured. And again, in the Hobbit, there's not quite as much suffering. He can go back more or less to the normal life. But Frodo is going to be more wounded. It's going to be much, much deeper as we do it. But it's still a circular journey that we go on. Wow. Now, oh, very good. See? Oh, we're starting to get to the crowns again here. What are you going to, unless you want to do what you did for the Narnia class, make those things, one for the Hobbit or one for each of the 3 books. The 3 parts of Lord of the Rings.
You see, as a fellow in the faith, I would expect.
You would expect that from me? I was just going to do a dragon.
Oh.
And you're going to put the face of Anthony on the dragon?
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
Oh, there we go.
It's a bearded dragon.
Bearded dragon.
He's looking at beards.
You can make a nice portrait of Amanda as an elf. You can draw it as Eowyn, because this is Eowyn over here. You can be Galadriel. Or Arwen, maybe. Let's see. Which one do you want to be? Oh,
Didn't we do the task before?
Which one were you? Megan? Meg? Oh! Meg! Oh, Meg! That's right! I forgot about that. That's right. She's funny. Meg. Oh, man. Gosh. So many years. Okay. Did you notice I got a haircut, by the way? Yeah, I just went there because in many ways school started Monday, so I got this on Monday, all ready to go. See? It was getting to be a mop. Anyway, it still grows. If your hair's going to stop growing, why doesn't it just stop? It's kind of annoying. Just if you want to stop, and you still have to get haircuts. I still have to get a haircut like every 3 months, or it gets wild. It's ridiculous. I know that because 6 months during the beginning of the quarantine was really. I don't know. Crazy stuff. Anyway, so look at paragraph 4. A little bit about the goblins, the orcs. Here's another quote from The Hobbit. Basically, Tolkien presents them as modern villains. That's how we explain it. It is not unlikely that they, the goblins or orcs, invented some of the machines that have since troubled the world, especially the ingenious devices for killing large numbers of people at once, for wheels and engines and explosions always delighted them, and also not working with their own hands. Tolkien he was not against all technology, but he was suspicious of the whole over-industrialization of things, right? When it becomes inhuman. He has no problem with a watermill, old-fashioned technology. But when everything becomes, what's the word I want? Assembly line. Automated, good. Everything's automated, machines. Well, we're going to find that one of the most important lines in Lord of the Rings, we'll learn several weeks down the road, but is when Treebeard says of Saruman, the magician that goes bad, he has a mind of metal and wheels. He does not care for things that grow, except inasmuch as they serve him. Right? So this is, and that's what's it. Both Tolkien and Lewis they're not like the crazy environmentalists today, but they are people that took seriously what we would call stewardship of creation. Oh, I'll have to look again. I've got that. Oh. Wow, it is done. I mean, the destruction and stuff, and if you've seen the movie, you'll remember that one of the ways they almost take down Helm's Deep is they basically invent gunpowder. And he shoots it, blows it up, and stuff. They do a good job of that in the movie. I mean, it's the firing power and stuff like that. But again, that this is something that he's not against all progress, but in sort of a dark industrialization, the power of destroying. Now, some people like to say, oh, the ring is the atom bomb. But even though he didn't publish it till 55, all of that stuff about the ring was written in the 30s. I'm sorry, in the 40s. But he started writing it, like 38. And even long before the atom bomb, he'd already had the ring. 3 or 4 years. So it's not the atom bomb. Well, the Silmarillion he did, not Lord of the Rings. But the idea of the ring, I mean, of course the ring is there in The Hobbit, but it doesn't become the ring until, The Hobbit, it's between 37 and 1949 that he writes it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's true. And destroying things. And the other one, of course, was gas warfare, which was terrible. The chemical warfare, I guess you would call it. Yeah. I mean, he saw it. Just increased ways to kill people and decimate them and all that sort of stuff. And again, we don't quite have, it's kind of there in the Silmarillion, but it's you start to see it in The Hobbit in a passage like this. And then it starts to come out in Lord of the Rings. But it's not. Now, those of you that were with me, we read The Magician's Nephew, the deplorable word, that's kind of a reference to the atom bomb. But that was written afterwards, right? Even though it was published the same time as The Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings already was in that. But he saw where things were going. The people that don't want to work with their hands, that want to manipulate. And we'll talk about this a lot over this semester. There's a difference between sort of technological magic that's used to control, and a sort of sympathetic magic where you're with nature. I'll explain it to you now, and we'll come back to this many, many times, but the magic of Saruman, the evil magician, is a magic that twists and perverts. He's the one that basically breeds a kind of orc that can live during the day, like a vampire, like Blade or whatever it is, a vampire that can put on suntan lotion and go out in the sun. It's ridiculous. As soon as you go out in the sun, you're not a vampire anymore. Okay, we're missing the point here. And he was still cool though. But anyway, he was still cool, but it's ridiculous. Come on, he's not a vampire if he can go out in the day. What's that? Edward? Oh, God, that's. Oh man. Burn all the movies. There we go. Man. Oh man.
We were free on Netflix for a while, and I was very hesitant to start it. And I was like,
it is instructive to watch those movies, because you will watch how 100 years of film craft has just fallen apart. They clearly spent a lot of movie, but just.
Is there hope that I can get a book published?
Yeah, no, because they are like the editing is all messed up. The way people look at each other, the stares. It's unbelievable. It's like, have you forgotten how to make a movie? And even if you didn't like the Harry Potter movies, they were well made. Like they're well made movies. They know their craft. I still can't get over that.
What's interesting about them is like the strong moral values that are being taught.
Well, the woman that wrote it's a Mormon, so she's got that. There's still values there.
It's like teenage girls who go much worse things.
Yeah.
I will say that whole triangle lot is the worst thing I've ever seen in cinema.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Everybody knows the brown guy's hotter.
Man. Anyway. Now, we have to take a vote to see if Clinton, Robert, or Anthony is Beorn. Which of them is the bear? I don't know. It's kind of hard now. They're kind of competing. You missed that one, Anthony. All right. Here we go. Expose yourself to art right there. So, anyway, amazing, right? So, I don't know. This is crazy. It started last semester. That's how we get it. Anyway, these guys are family now, so you get away with anything. But again, this industrialization. He was very sick, and I mean, one time, one of his neighbors cut down a tree, and I mean, Tolkien was horrified. He considered it arbocide. And one of the trees in front of had a crack in it, and it's like, I don't want it falling on my house, and so I did have to have it taken down. But I sent a text picture to my kids and my mom, and I'm like, I had to do this, but I feel really guilty right now, and I know Tolkien is mad at me in the grave. I mean, I did, I had to atone or something, because to him that was like killing a tree. It's terrible, right? It's a living thing. It's beautiful. Anyway.
I've always hugged trees when I was a kid.
You were a tree hugger? There we go. You're a tree hugger.
I seriously felt like they were people, so I would stop and hug them.
Oh, yeah.
It was weird. I was like, I don't know. I was a kid.
Well, then one of your
I was like playing in the woods. I would stop and hug the tree.
one of your artworks has to be about Treebeard. You're going to do something with the Ents? You should do something.
What's that?
You have to do something with the Ents this semester.
I love it. I've done lots of drawings and games with them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I love it. You did a great job too at Treebeard. Anyway, okay, another thing. The next paragraph. One of the most important things is the whole riddles in the dark, where he meets Gollum and he gets the ring and stuff. And Gollum is very treacherous, and Bilbo, who's now invisible, has the chance to kill Gollum. And this will be discussed in the Lord of the Rings. But here, this could be maybe even the most important thing. It says Bilbo, and he says he must stab the foul thing, put its eyes out, kill it. It meant to kill him. No, in a sense, this is all going through Bilbo's mind. No, not a fair fight. He was invisible now. Gollum had no sword. Gollum had not actually threatened to kill him or tried to yet, and he was miserable, alone, lost. And then the line, a sudden understanding, right? A pity mixed with horror welled up in Bilbo's heart, right? A glimpse of endless, unmarked days without light or hope of betterment. Hard stone, cold fish, sneaking and whispering. There's suddenly an intense pity, a sort of, we would call it empathy. Suddenly, for a moment, he understands the horror of the life of Gollum and what it's been reduced to. And then that line, all these thoughts passed in a flash of a second. He trembled, and then, quite suddenly, in another flash, as if lifted by a new strength and resolve, he leaped. He jumps over. And we're going to find out that the happy ending, I mean, there still is a happy ending, so to speak, in Lord of the Rings that it's destroyed, but we'll talk about this as we go along. We would not have had that good ending if 3 different hobbits did not learn pity. First, Bilbo learns pity and doesn't kill Gollum when he has the chance, and in a sense he almost has a right to do it. And of course, one of the reasons why he was able to give up the ring is that if he had started his possession of the ring with killing the owner, he would have been consumed by it, like Gollum was. But he didn't, right? The second person, of course, is Frodo. As we'll see, he learns to pity Gollum and to try to reform him. But even that's not too good. Does anybody know who the third Hobbit is, who shows pity at the very end? It's Sam. Sam has a chance to kill Gollum, and he's got every right to kill that treacherous guy. But just for a moment, partly because Sam had briefly been a ring bearer, he understood and didn't kill him. So if any of them had killed him, we wouldn't have had the happy ending. Frodo would have put on the ring, and he would have been a new Dark Lord or something like that. Right? And it doesn't make any difference. He still doesn't really have a career, does he? Poor Elijah Wood. He's been in a few things, but he's just too short to be a leading man. But he's popped up in a few things. But sometimes it's like really eerie roles, stuff like that. It's not fair. Poor guy. What's that? He's done some movies, yeah. He was in there. I don't know. Elijah Wood. Okay. The next one, okay. Again, we won't go into this, but what's really neat about The Hobbit is when you read back into it, there's a lot of times in this book where Gandalf, disappears. And part of that is because it's forcing Bilbo to become the hero he's supposed to be. But we find out, just in bits and pieces, why he keeps disappearing. Okay? And again, if you want to look at that map that we were looking at the back of your book, it's the first map in the back, the one that's got the... And you do understand how this works? Okay, it's been broken into 4 quadrants, and then the maps afterwards zero into these quadrants, is what Tolkien has done there. But just to show you, okay, this place, it used to be called Greenwood, but now it's Murkwood. And if you watch the movie versions, you'll see where Radagast is realizing that the wood is getting darker and darker. Because, actually, let me see. I think you can see it in a different place. Yeah, if you turn 2 more pages to here, this is a little bit of a blow-up of that. In here, in this Murkwood, all the way at the bottom, you'll see something that says Dol Guldur. And it looks like a pelican next to it, which I've never quite understood. I don't know if you can figure out. It looks like a little bird or something. I'm not sure what that is. But Dol Guldur, okay? That's important, and it's also in the Hobbit movies. They really blow this up in the Hobbit movies. Is Sauron had originally been in Mordor from the beginning. But after he was destroyed, after the ring was destroyed at the end of the Second Age, and then he started to reappear in Dol Guldur. He made that like his new fortress. And during The Hobbit, the White Council, which is Gandalf and Galadriel and Elrond, all the people we're going to meet, and Saruman, just before he goes bad, they gather together in what's called the White Council, and they drive Sauron, they drive Sauron out of Dol Guldur, and he goes back to Mordor, where he is in the Lord of the Rings. Okay, so there's a little bit of movement around there to help us figure it out. But I want to, first I'll read this and then it's there, but this is what's so fun. If you want to read the Hobbit again, you'll just have fun. I'm just going to read you a passage, because these are passages that in the Hobbit are, told like in fairy tale language, but let's see if we can figure out what they really refer to in the Silmarillion, which nobody had read up to this point. So it says, okay, the feasting people were wood elves. These are the elves that live in Murkwood. They're the ones that capture the dwarves and put them in prison, and then they escape on the barrels. And that's a really cool scene. The barrel riding scene is really cool, right? Okay, he says, these are not wicked folk. If they have a fault, it is distrust of strangers, and elves are like that. Though their magic was strong, even in those days they were wary. They differed from the high elves of the West. You know who the high elves of the West are? Those are the ones we call the Noldor. That's the family that we saw in the Silmarillion. They're the Noldor. The elves in Murkwood are the Sindar elves. Right? They're the wood elves. And their king, you'll see him in the movie, is Thranduil, one of the weirdest looking dudes in all movie history, right? I think. Remember how many memes there were of Thranduil? I think he's been beaten by Bernie Sanders now. The gloves. That's what it reminds me of. The Thranduil dudes everywhere, Anyways, it's strange. But so it says, they differed from the high elves of the West, the Noldor, and were more dangerous and less wise. For most of them, together with their scattered relations in the hills and mountains, were descended from the ancient tribes that never went to ferry in the West. You know what ferry means here? What is it reference to? That's what we call Valinor. Okay? That fairy in the west is Valinor. Right? It just suddenly, like I said, it's just like moving from The Hobbit to The Lord of the Rings. We're suddenly like upping the ante a little bit here. But that's what it means. Fairy, and any of you, if you're really into fantasy, you should feel that little kind of thrill when you see the word fairy spelled this way. F-A-E. And especially if you put a umlaut in the better. You ever feel that way when you see fairy? Right? It's not just... When fairies spelled that way, it's not just those little people, the fairies. It's the land where those people live. Fairy is the whole realm that you move into. A good example of that is you move into fairy when you cross the hedge in what great fantasy movie? There's a little hole in the hedge and they cross through it. You know? I think it's one of my favorites. It's called The Stardust. You ever seen that? It's Neil Gaiman wrote that. You know, Neil Gaiman wrote that. Yeah, exactly. No, I love the Sandman. That's talking about archetypes everywhere. Sandman's great. But Stardust is one of the best fantasies I've seen because it really captures it just right and all that sort of stuff. And you'll also be amazed at how beautiful what's her name, Michelle Pfeiffer is. I think she was like 50 when she made that movie, and she looks like she's 25. It's amazing. Yeah, she is. Stardust. Yeah, it's called Stardust. Yeah, Stardust. Yeah, it really is. If you get to see it, it's unique. There's a matter of taste when we get to watch Robert De Niro's sort of somewhat gay pirate, but it's so ridiculous you have to laugh. I don't know what he's doing. Anyway, cross-dressing pirate or something. What? No, you have to see it. It's a lot of fun. You'll see it. It's hard to do fantasy that really works, but that movie actually works. So they never went to Fairy because, again, they never left. They stayed in Middle-earth. Then it says, there the light elves and the deep elves and the sea elves went. Remember them? Those are the Teleri, the ones that they killed to steal their ships. Went and lived for ages and grew fairer and wiser and more learned and invented their magic and their cunning craft in the making of beautiful and marvelous things. Because when they went to Valinor, they learned from the Valar and all that sort of stuff, and their craft, making things like the Silmarils, making the seeing stones, the Palantir. Before, some came back into the wide world. In the wide world, the wood elves lingered in the twilight of our sun and moon. Right? See, remember, the sun and moon is us, humans. Right? The elves are the children of the stars. Because there was no sun and moon yet, because the two trees were there and hadn't been destroyed. So, but loved best the stars, and they wandered in the great forest that grew tall in lands that are now lost. You know what the lost lands are? The lost lands are Balerion. Why is that a lost land? Where is it? Yeah, it's under the ocean, under the great wave. So it's gone. It's gone. Maybe that's where, does anybody ever heard of Tir na Nog? I wonder if you've heard of that, Bill. That's an Irish fairy tale. Tir na Nog is the land of eternal youth. It's often under the waters that you go to. Anyway, it's cool. They dwelt most often by the edges of the woods, from which they could escape at times to hunt or to ride, and run over the open lands by moonlight or starlight. And after the coming of men, they took ever more and more to the gloaming and the dusks. Still, elves they were and remain, and that is good people. That's how Texans talk. They're good people, right? Maybe even more Kentucky and Tennessee, more than that. You say that, don't you? They're good people, right? It's funny that he says that. I think I'm British saying that. But okay, now here's another quote that's actually in your thing. I ran out of room. Again, it's so exciting because it's in the Hobbit, but behind it, you now know what it means. You've broken the code. You know the secrets. It's really cool. You've been initiated, right? Okay, you're Masons or something. In ancient days, the wood elves, that is the Sindar, had wars with some of the dwarves whom they accused of stealing their treasure. And now I've given it away by putting it. That's the necklace with the Silmaril. Remember that Thingol gets? Where they took the necklace of the dwarves and they put the Silmaril in it? And remember I told you that's when the hatred between dwarves and elves started. And they killed Thingol and they killed each other. This is a very vague reference to that, the backstory. He said, it is only fair to say that the dwarves gave a different account and said that they only took what was their due, for the elf king had bargained with them to shape his raw gold and silver, and had afterwards refused to give them their pay. Anybody know who the elf king is? It's Thingol, very good. And you might think it's the head of the Noldor, the Noldor. But remember, the Noldor, in some ways, were always interlopers in Beleriand. The real elf king of Beleriand is Thingol, okay, who stayed behind. But that's who it is. He's just the elf king, but that's Thingol. The whole story we talked about, how they fought and they killed him and things like that. And, they both had, a different version of the story. If the elf king, Thingol, had a weakness, it was for treasure, especially for silver and white gems. And though his hoard was rich, he was ever eager for more, since he had not yet as great a treasure as other elf lords of old. Those other elf lords would be the Noldor, right? Who've got the Silmarils and all those other things. And remember, he sends a baron to get him a Silmaril. His people neither mined nor worked metals or jewels, because that's what the Noldor do. Feanor did that. Remember, Feanor's grandson made the rings. Nor did they bother much with trade or with tilling the earth. All this was well known to every dwarf, though Thorin's family had nothing to do with the old quarrel I have spoken of. That's why the friendship between Gimli and Legolas is such a big deal, because elves and dwarves have been, enemies for thousands of years now. Like a Texan calling the Civil War the recent unpleasantness. Ever heard that? That old phrase, the recent unpleasantness, 150 years ago. Okay. I have spoken. Consequently, Thorin was angry at their treatment of him when they took their spell of him and he came to his senses, and also he was determined that no word of gold or jewels should be dragged out of him. Right? So, one of the things about Lord of the Rings that is so powerful is it's layered. Right? Wherever you go, there's layers and layers of history. And anywhere you cut into it, that's what makes it so rich. And that's why he tried, but it didn't work. Do you know what other big epic movie Peter Jackson made? That's just The Hobbit, but in between? Oh, close. Not Planet of the Apes, but what do we say? He's the one that made the new King Kong. And it is actually a pretty good movie with the beautiful Naomi Watts. Did a good job, but you could see that he's trying to do it every so often in King Kong, because the idea is that the people living on that island now are primitive, but the people before them were the ones that had built that huge village and the huge wall, right? And that's why I always ask the question, if you're trying to keep a 100-foot gorilla out of your village, why do you build a gate big enough for him to fit through? That's what I've never figured out. But anyway, if you watch it again, you keep seeing layers, but it doesn't have the resonance that Lord of the Rings does. He's trying. It looks cool visually, but it's not connected to anything. You're not, just like the dwarves are kind of cute, but you're not invested in them in the way you're invested in all the characters of Lord of the Rings. So the endless battle is just an endless battle. You're invested in the battles of Lord of the Rings because you know all the key players and what they're doing, what they're fighting for and stuff. So Peter Jackson tried, but The Hobbit's not an epic. It's a beautiful children's story, one of the best ones ever written. But anyway, there. Okay, another thing, and this will become really big in Lord of the Rings. Greed is a major temptation. Greed, okay? In the Silmarillion, it's the greed for the Silmarils. In the Lord of the Rings, it's the ring. In here, it's not. They make it a little bit bigger in the movie than it is in the book, though it is pretty big in the book. There's a special gem called the Arkhan Stone. I don't know if any of you are into that kind of, I don't know what you call it, new agey music, but one of the best ones that makes that Celtic stuff is a guy named David Arkhan Stone. I've always wondered if that's his real name or he made that up, because it's too perfect a name for somebody that does that Celtic stuff. He's really good. He did a CD based on Lord of the Rings before the movies came out. That I probably listened to that more than any other CD I have. I think it's just called Middle Earth. But anyway, it's just wonderful. David Arkhan Stone, what a cool name. So, and the movie tried. I think they really were trying when they made The Hobbit Part 2 to make another Lord of the Rings, because they were trying to build up Thorin so he would become a new Aragorn, right? And they were trying to build up Bilbo even more, and they also built up the ring a little bit. They were trying to parallel, and just the third movie just didn't. I don't think it paid off on that part. But they did try. They were trying to get that dimension to it. But the greed is still there, and I gave you a little thing. At one point, even Bilbo feels the power of it. And there's another quote: Bilbo had heard tell and sing of dragon hordes before, But the splendor, the lust, the glory of such treasure had never yet come home to him. His heart was filled and pierced with enchantment and with the desire of dwarves. And he gazed motionless, almost forgetting the frightful guardian, at the gold beyond price and count. Even he feels that greed of the dwarves. They call it dragon fever. You know what they call the movie? Or gold. Dragon fever. Dragon sickness. I'm sorry, that dragon sickness. With the gold, and it's like spinning around. Even Bilbo feels it for a second. But he gets over it. And in fact, the most amazing thing he does in the book, it's in the movie too, is to try to bring reconciliation. He actually takes the Arkhan Stone and takes it to the other people, because he hopes they can use it to bargain. And because Thorin's really a terrible person in many ways. I mean, he's kind of redeemed, sort of like Boromir. He's going to be redeemed by dying in battle and asking forgiveness and all. But he's pretty bad, really. And the movie, shows him that way. But by the way, there's no love affair between a dwarf and an elf in the book, just in case you're wondering. But I did want to like that because the elf was played by the beautiful Kate. And if you watch Lost, TV show Lost, remember that beautiful girl that played Kate? She's the one that plays that elf. What's it? Oh, that's right. I forgot. That is, yeah. She's a likable actress. But what is her name? I can't remember. I know. I didn't get a chance to go, but a friend of mine last Saturday, he did his own cut, his own edit, where he cut it down, cut things out, got it all down to about 6.5 hours, the whole thing. And I've got to borrow it from someday. He's actually one that taught at the same school with Lupe before he moved. And he teaches media stuff over here in Sharpstown. And he did his own cut to trim down all the crazy excesses and stuff. Well, no, I mean, the 3 movies together are probably like 9 hours. He cut it down to about 6.5. I think maybe about 9 hours altogether. I mean, it was really supposed to only be 2 movies. And I think the producers pushed him to make 3, thinking they'd make more money. Yeah, really. Take it away. I know, it's crazy. It's crazy. How you doing? So okay, we have the Battle of the 5 Armies. In case you ever wonder what the Battle of the 5 Armies is, it is the men of Lake Town, the elves, and the dwarves. And at first, the men and the elves are fighting the dwarves, and then along come the goblins and the wargs. Some people might suggest it's the eagles, but it seems to be the goblins and the wargs, those wolf things, are the 5 armies. And then, of course, the eagles always come in the last minute to save the day. But what's really cool, and I've written this down there, look at the middle of page 2. As soon as the Battle of the 5 Armies begins, and I'm not the only one that's noticed this, I've read other critics, the diction and rhetoric starts getting serious. It sounds more like some old medieval, like the language gets a little bit, gritty's not the right word, again, gravitas, it gets more serious. Just look at how the language changes. It's almost like getting us ready for the Lord of the Rings. Ever since the fall of the great goblin of the Misty Mountains, they make him the hugest, fattest thing in the world in the movie, a giant goblin. Anyway. It says, ever since the fall of the great goblin of the Misty Mountains, the hatred of their race for the dwarves had been rekindled to fury. Messengers had passed to and fro between all their cities, colonies, and strongholds, for they resolved now to win the dominion of the north. Tidings they had gathered in secret ways, and in all the mountains there was a forging and an arming. Then they marched and gathered by hill and valley, going ever by tunnel or under dark, until around and beneath the great mountain Gundabad of the north, where was their capital, a vast host was assembled, ready to sweep down in time of storm, unawares upon the south. I mean, it's like suddenly, it's getting a little bit grittier, a little bit more like the Silmarillion or something like that. He's starting to find that rhetoric that's going to be the Lord of the Rings, that way of speaking and whatnot. And anyway, it's really cool. Also, I mentioned, like I said, the movie picks up on this. When Thorin Oakenshield first makes it to Lake Town, they celebrate him as if it's a messianic coming. And so there is a little bit of a link to the later Aragorn. It's like he's there because he used to be king. His father was king under the mountain, and then the dragon came and kicked them all out. Right, and then then it's the grandfather, and then the father, and then Thorin. As we go down, the 3 of them. And just one of my favorite poems in The Hobbit, he says, "The stream shall run in gladness, the lake shall shine and burn, all sorrow fail and sadness at the mountain king's return." And you'll see when Aragorn comes finally to Gondor, the White City, at the end, near the end of the novel, there's a poem like that as well. Call out! Your Messiah has returned. He's come on his white horse or whatever. He's returned. It's beautiful stuff. Okay, two more passages that I think are really important. As Thorin is on his deathbed, there is a reconciliation. Just like when Boromir dies, he sort of reconciles with Aragorn. The movie death scene is actually better than the novel that time. But as they go back and forth, and these are Thorin's words, he says, I just love this. There is more in you of good than you know, child of the kindly West. Some courage and wisdom blended in measure. If more of us valued food and cheer and song over hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world. But sad or merry, I must leave it now. Farewell. Beautiful. By the way, if you want to have fun, you might even be able to find it on YouTube. There is a cartoon version of The Hobbit. It's actually quite good. It's low budget, but it's well done, and it's got some good voices, and they're pretty faithful to the story, and it's very
I
good.
used to watch those in the school gymnasium in school.
Did you watch? Yeah.
It was the best.
Yeah, they were good.
They played on the real projector.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
The old Hobbit cartoon. It was fantastic. They're like little stubby guys.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they were there.
The songs were great.
I liked the song. They were really pretty. They were almost an old Celtic sound,
I seen the documentary that Tolkien family was not a big fan of it. They said that it was more like Disney-fied.
Oh, see,
They didn't like. They didn't like.
I know it is. That's what's funny about it. Yeah.
Cartoonish because they said it was.
Of course, the family didn't like Lord of the Rings either, which was just crazy.
When I was like reading the beginning of the Hobbit,
Uh-huh.
I got like 7 words in my head.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Because like you said, the so many words from the Hobbit movies
Yeah.
did not fit this.
Yeah.
It just kept like all the colors and like cute little hoods and stuff more. It's like, how did this should have looked like?
Yeah. Yeah, they do it, and again, they just try to make it more epic. You try to make everything, a little bit darker, toned down, take away a little of the silliness. I mean, they still had the flying plates. That was funny, going back and forth and stuff. It's like those old karate movies where they're spinning around all over the place and destroying, the laws of physics. It's great stuff. But here it is, and it's wonderful, by the way, because he says you have courage. And you have wisdom blended in measure, which is temperance. It's like the classical virtues. The only one missing is justice. But the idea is, if you do these, there's be justice, courage, wisdom, self-control, and justice on the what we call the classical virtues. And there is a goodness, a strength in the hobbits. And then the last line, which oddly they messed up a little bit in the movie. It's so important. The very last line. Gandalf, is talking to Bilbo, and Bilbo's like, really? He's talking about prophecies, and he says, surely you don't disbelieve the prophecies because you had a hand in bringing them about yourself. You don't really suppose, do you, that all your adventures and escapes were managed by mere luck, just for your sole benefit? You are a very fine person, Mr. Baggins, and I am very fond of you, but you are only quite a little fellow in a wide world, after all. And the wonderful response from Bilbo is, thank goodness. Okay, he's this humble guy in the end. And by the way, I didn't really think about it again until I watched the movie and read the book again, that there is, again, if you've only seen the movie, rightly so, it leaves it out because it would have been too anticlimactic. But in the novel, when they come back to the Shire, there's a scene called the Scouring of the Shire, where things have gone bad, where Saruman has messed things up, and it would have been just too anticlimactic for a movie. If it was a miniseries, they could have done it. But what's interesting is that the end of The Hobbit has a little bit like that, because when Bilbo comes home, because this is not in the cartoon run, when Bilbo comes home, they're in the midst of selling his house and auctioning off all of his furniture because they think he's dead. It's the Sackville Bagginses. When his ears start to wiggle when they're closer, so there is a little bit of darkness, not as much at the end of The Hobbit. Not like it's going to be there, but anyway, but again, this idea that you're a very little person, right? And that phrase, you got to understand, the wide world meant so much more for Lewis and Tolkien. Does anybody know a famous British children's novel where the animals named rat and mole go out to the wide world? Anybody know? It's not read as much by Americans, but every British person knows this. It's called The Wind in the Willows. Are you familiar with that? I mean, some of you might know it if you saw the old Disney Mr. Toad. Was it Ichabod and Mr. Toad? Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, which was it used to be a ride in Disney World when I was a kid. I don't know if it's still there. It's one of those ones in the carnival where you're in a car and it keeps busting through things and stuff. It was one of those. I don't even know if they still have it. I remember that in Disney when I was a kid. It was cool because my grandparents retired in Florida, and I think we went to Disney World like the first or second year it was open in the mid-'70s when I was a kid. My parents took us down. And the old days, it wasn't, Disney invented the pay one price, which is pretty brilliant. And then Six Flags picked it up. But when you got there in the beginning, you got a book of tickets, and there were A tickets, B, C, D, E. And like E were the big rides, like the Haunted Mansion, little ones. And it was just very confusing. And then somebody just had the brilliant idea, pay one price, get all their money from them, and then go, And a lot, they also cut a lot of workers when they did that too. Anyway, oh man, gosh, it's so wonderful. If you wanted to take a business class, you could have taken your business students to Disney World and then taken them to the Astroworld when we had Six Flags to see the difference between well-run and terribly run. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Did anybody, when you were a kid, go on the Mayan Mindbender? That was a great ride, but it was forever. They were the most incompetent people I've ever seen. Oh my gosh. It's hysterical. Yeah. I guess the difference is at least it's Houston, so they're just incompetent. They're not rude and incompetent like they are in other cities.
My mom, she worked at the Underground.
Oh, Thunder Ring? Yeah, that's right, the Roaring Rapids thing.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the reason I know they were mismanaged is because we took our kids to the one in Dallas, to the one in San Antonio, to the one in Chicago, and they were all so much better run. It's like, oh, this is how you run an amusement park, Amazing. Oh, you did? Yeah, always wonderful. And San Antonio always had the best shows. They were much more talented. Of course, that's because it used to be its own. Well, actually, Astroworld used to be its own until it was bought out by Six Flags. And Fiesta Texas was its own private, and then they got bought out. And then there was one in New Orleans called Jazzland, and Six Flags bought it out. I took my kids there because we had season passes, and the next year, it was destroyed by Katrina. It's like, they must have lost a lot of... And, seriously, go online and type in, Six Flags New Orleans, because it's one of those ghost towns where they just left it. That's sort of scary, where you could still see the carnival stuff and all, and it's decaying. It's really cool. What do they call it? A ghost carnival, whatever you call it. It's really cool to see the thing. Do you see it? You know what I'm talking about? But yeah, it's still up there. Last time I checked, I didn't go there. But anyway, one more thing here too. Notice where it says, again, you don't suppose it was all managed by mere luck, do you? One thing we're going to talk about a lot in the Lord of the Rings, because again, it is very much a Christian book, and he says particularly a Catholic book, but it's much deeper, right? What you see all the time is the hand of providence. Providence. It's kind of a word from God, but it's the same root as our word provide. Can you guess what it actually means? What does pro mean, that root? Not profession, but say before. Good, before. And I think you can guess what this means. Just add an O to the end of that word. What do you get? Video. Okay, so it means see. So provide means to see before. When we say the Lord provides, it means he sees before what we need. That's literally what it means. God provides. This is good for a sermon right here. Literally what it means, right? So providence, God seeing before. But you're going to see again and again. It's in the Hobbit, but even more in the Lord of the Rings. And just by luck, or so it seems. He's always throwing that in, right? And by chance, as they call it, that there's always something behind the scenes. Another force, not the ring, but something deeper that we go there. So, we saw you sneaking that chip there. And, oh my gosh. Woo. Okay. Provide. Yeah, V-I-D. Think of the word video. Vide means to see. You said that. So the means to see before. Literally is what provide means. You know. Yeah, my father's is a little bit of a skeptic, and he used to tease me. He's like, "Are you going to write the Lord provides on your check?" You know, he'd like to tease me on there. Lord provides. Oh my gosh! I don't know if I should give you a break or press on. Let's just take a few minutes and stretch. Does anybody want to come over and talk to Anthony? All this is running, or talk to Paula too. Hey, Paula. Maybe stretch. We'll just let it keep going. We'll stretch before we start The Lord of the Rings. Oh, yeah, this is kind of a neat edition I have of it.
Imagine Lord of the Rings, reading any series that has
If you flip through this edition, it's got full page pictures. Pilgrim is a pretty good illustrator.
Yeah, it's this documentary I've been watching on Amazon.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I guess it was a couple series. I'm on episode 1.
Tolkien? What is it?
Yeah, about Tolkien. You know, you talk about how he wrote letters to the children.
What? The Father Christmas kid. Oh, that's beautiful.
And how he did most of the watercolors.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, flip through this. Just
And then he was saying how our version of the man with a Hobbit glove totally different than what Tolkien had about. Tolkien lived in an area where it was full of, trees and that's what he did, the way he grew up at.
Oh, that's right, that place there. Yeah, flip through it. You'll see some of the pictures. They're pretty cool.
Yeah, no thing about it. Yeah.
So, I don't know. I'd love to see somebody do like how they've done these miniseries lately, like the Mandalorian. I've not seen any of them, but it looks good. The Game of Thrones stuff. I'd love to see somebody take Lord of the Rings and do that kind of thing with it, where they can go in detail and stay faithful.
Problem is that with this, what we kind of we've been seeing lately, I'm really afraid that they would destroy it.
I got a lot of hope in miniseries now after watching The Mandalorian. I think like
You have to have the right. Okay, John Favreau, I would trust him to do it.
yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, it has to come to a approach where you're not going to take like any license in it. It's just let's be faithful to let's tell the story of Lord of the Rings, the real miniseries, and do a good job and stay faithful to the book. I think that would break the bank for Netflix or Amazon or anybody who wanted to get on board with something like that.
Amazon is doing a series. I think it's the Second Age.
Yeah, it was the latter half of the Silmarillion. I saw. Which that would be cool too. You know.
That's only, well, my concern is they're going to turn it into like Game of Thrones style, which it's not quite. So we're so
I've heard that.
more pleasant.
I'll assume the best of them until they prove me wrong. I want to see. I used to work in a comic book store, and I've been wrong about so many. It's like, oh, they're going to ruin this. No, they didn't. So, like the Dark Knight series. I watched the Batman Begins, and I don't know where this is going to go. And then it ends up being like the best comic book series. That was good. You know. And then they came back and tried to ruin the DC world. I don't know who all's in charge of that. Batman versus Superman is just atrocious.
I never watched that. The only DC film I like at this point is Wonder Woman.
Oh.
Aquaman was okay. Which one? Aquaman. I said Wonder. I haven't seen Aquaman.
You like the second Wonder Woman, really?
I've only seen the first one.
I haven't seen the new one yet. It doesn't sound good.
I watched the first one on there. It was pretty good. If it was like in a bigger
Really, very good.
yeah.
I think DC just need to get some writers on Marvel movies
Yeah.
Like, a lot more of the movie compared to DC is like night and day. And I
Yeah.
think DC got a lot more character, a lot more story they can tell.
Mhm.
It just can't transition into the big screen.
Yeah.
Except with Batman, both of those are pretty decent, but
DC as a universe is just darker than Marvel. Always has
so
been.
you would think he should make some real good, Like, I like to see one that said Legion of Doom.
Right.
Oh, I love to see
one of
that.
my favorite
Oh.
characters.
That'd be so class.
That would be cool.
That would.
What do y'all think's going to happen with the new Batman series?
With the new Batman.
With Edward,
Robert Pattinson.
Robert
Oh,
Pattinson's
yeah.
fan.
Edward,
Probably interesting.
Edward.
Yeah.
Only marginally better than Christmas Eve.
Oh, really?
They said that it's going to be, well, who's, who's the guy that played, who's the Christopher Nolan Batman guy? Shoot, what's his name? Famous actor? Yeah, Christian Bale. Christian Bale said that Pattinson he said he's actually a very good, underrated actor, and he said he's really optimistic about his interpretation of Batman. So,
I'd be excited about him too. I mean, I think he probably is a very. I've only seen him in what, Harry Potter, but I don't know. I've read a lot of stuff about his views on Twilight, and his views on Twilight make me more optimistic about him because he hated it.
yeah, I was going to say, like,
He hated every second of it.
Oh, wow.
Twilight, he was the best part of Twilight.
I know, right? That's what it seems.
He was like, you could tell that he was a good actor, surrounded by a bunch of bad actors and directors, is what it seemed like.
Bad writing.
Yeah. The Twilight story was interesting, as far as the story goes. It was like, yeah, I don't know. Kind of poorly done. When I was studying for Lord of the Rings, this class, I tried to watch Harry Potter, and I was like, this is kind of the poor man's Lord of the Rings about the role. I see a lot of parallels.
With Harry Potter?
Yeah.
I haven't watched that third.
I think I made it to the fourth one.
I think bits and pieces of all of them. They actually watch it.
The rental books.
The rental for you? Riddle. Oh, yes.
I want to remake all the Harry Potter.
You want to remake the Harry Potter movies?
Yeah.
You didn't like them?
I liked them, but the books are better.
I mean, well, first, the first one follows the book very carefully. Then the books get kind of so long, right?
Yeah.
Afterwards.
But my thing with Harry Potter is they have a lot of good character development in the books, and everything's very shallow in the books. Drives me bonkers.
You need to remake the Percy Jackson movies. Those are awful.
I've always wanted to see those. I've never seen them.
I mean, if you've never read the book, they're fun to watch. But yeah, if you've read the book, then they're much more disappointing. Although, remember, they did add one good scene, and that's when they went to. Have you ever been to Nashville to the Parthenon that has Athena inside? They add something that's not in the book apparently, where the statue of Athena comes to life. That was kind of cool in the movie. What's that? Like, inside, if you in the Parthenon there. Because if you've ever been in there, you see it outside, but then you have to pay a little bit when you go in. And inside, they've made a giant statue of Athena, like they had in ancient Greece, and it like comes to life. Huh. Which one's that?
Well, there's a scene between and then the evil one, Umbridge. They have like so much back and forth in there, and it's amazing, and they don't have any of it.
Oh.
It is the highlight of this whole series.
Well, what's the other one too?
It's like one tiny little piece.
Isn't there one called the something army? What's?
Dumbledore's army.
Oh yeah, didn't they say that we see the kids, but we don't see what the adults are doing, which is like half the book or something? It's pretty much left out.
They have a lot of big name adult actors who they don't use as much as they should.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, 'cause they did get great actors. Yeah. this is just like magic. I love that line. That's the Ken Branagh character when he gets zapped.
Okay.
He's great.
He built everything.
Oh yeah, he's perfect in that movie. That was perfect in that movie. And then of course Emma Thompson, who he used to be married to, came in and played the goofy lady. Yeah, did you watch? Did you get a chance to watch Frankenstein? I can't remember the Ken Branagh Frankenstein when I talked about it in our class.
You talked about it. I don't think I remember.
Oh, you should see it. It's good. I think it was on Amazon. I'm sure it's still on Amazon. Yeah, it's fascinating. What's that? There's Ken Branagh made his own version of Frankenstein where he's the doctor, and of all people, Robert De Niro plays the monster. It's very unique. And that was about 20 years ago now. It's been a while. Yeah. And Helena Bonham Carter is in it too. That's it. Yeah.
Did you ever see the Henry V?
Oh, I love that. It's one of his best movies. That was his first movie, and it's his best. That and then right after Much Ado About Nothing is also, those two are really good. Yeah. Of course, his Cinderella is actually the best live action Disney movie they've made. Live action based on a cartoon, I think, is the best. He directed Cinderella. When they did the live action Cinderella with Lily James, he didn't write it, but he directed it. He's actually directed a number of movies that are good that he didn't write. He just directed. He directed the first Thor movie, which was very good. And there was one other thing. He directed a few that were pretty good. Like I said, the Cinderella, and I'm thinking another one. What's that? Yeah, the one with Lily James, the recent one. He directed that. And I think that's the best of the live action animated movies.
I've seen the live action Cinderella. It was very old. I have it on VHS.
Oh, really? Huh. He was in that. Huh. But yeah, that one was good. But yeah, like I said, Ken Branagh's been doing directing as well. He directed the ill-fated movie of, who's that kid that's like a FBI spy or something like that? You know what I'm talking about? It was a series. Was it? Yeah. Is that one? It's on Disney Channel now, the Disney Plus. But it just didn't work. What's it? Yeah. Yeah. What was it called? Was it Alex Rider or was it a different one? It's the guy's name. Well, I guess he's a British kid, and he's like super high IQ and stuff, and he's in that big house, and the people are coming after him, and his father is away on a mission.
Oh, that's the other one.
It's the other one. You're right. Yeah, that was a series of books too. The kid, but it just didn't quite work, which is a shame. They made that other movie that didn't work, Wrinkle in Time. I mean, it was watchable, but but yeah, they just they spent all this money, and it's. Of course, there's also Cats. Oh boy, they wasted a lot of money on that. Anybody could have told them you can't make this into a movie. It just doesn't work,
First time I've been traumatized by a tree.
Well, you were what?
First time I've ever been traumatized by a tree.
I read on IMDb somebody said after I watched that movie, I can't look at my cat in the same way. It messed up his relationship with his cat. I just loved it. Oh, which one? Oh, that's true. Yeah, Judi Dench.
And watch The Last Starfighter.
Oh, that was a fun movie. That was when I was. That's a long time ago.
Right now, watch The Last Starfighter.
It wasn't that bad. Wasn't that, yeah, with the kid that's playing the video game and then he gets recruited. Yeah.
Last Starfighter, lower your expectations, enjoy.
It had a small role for Robert, the guy that was in The Music Man. He's kind of playing The Music Man. Was in that movie. The recruiter guy. Are we ready to dive into the Lord of the Rings and see what we can cover today? Thinking about it stuff. I'm just going to mention a few things from his foreword to the second edition. I'll just throw a few things in here. So it's XXII, Roman numeral 22. XXII. Just a few things that I talked about. This is Tolkien's foreword. Notice at the end of the first paragraph, he says, especially since it was primarily linguistic in inspiration and was begun in order to provide the necessary background of history for Elvish tongues. That's something I mentioned to you in the first day of class, just to see Tolkien himself said it. He didn't invent the stories and then flesh them out with languages. He invented the languages and fleshed out the language with the stories. So he himself is saying, notice in the second edition, he's kind of clarifying things. Then on the next page, XXIII 23. He says again, just before that little space break. Is it a space break? Anyway, it's the just before the paragraph that starts with "As for any inner meetings." Just love Tolkien. He could be a great curmudgeon, and people, complained about this and complained about that and complained about that, and he finally said, "Okay, I'm going to pass over all of your thing, but I will concede one thing." And he says at the end of the paragraph, he says, "He will pass over these in silence, except one that has been noted by others. The book is too short." The only thing that Tolkien will concede is the book is too short. I love this guy, And maybe it is. It could have been longer. Could have been on and on and on and on. You look like a scared rabbit. Are you okay? Oh, yeah, okay. Oh, I know, this is ridiculous. Wasn't I telling you all? My son showed me on Amazon, you can buy 50 of these for $8 on Amazon. Somebody said you can buy them at Costco too now, but just go on Amazon, 15 masks just like this, $8. And they came, Oh, were they bad? I'll have to see. Really, I went, I always read all the reviews, and there were a few that were bad. These seemed to be pretty good. I thought, okay, I'll try them, can throw them away. We'll see. I just started using them, so. Yeah, not anymore. That's why I much prefer that, so I can actually breathe better and people can actually see your face. But now they've gone back to everybody's got to have a mask. Okay, my son teaches classical Christian school in Bernie. My daughter teaches at a classical charter school up in Louisville near Dallas. And both of them, as long as they are in front of the class, like I am with you all, they don't have to wear a mask at all. And as far as I know, there's been no outbreaks or anything. I don't know if all the schools are like that. Maybe, Houston is probably the most strict in Texas, I'm guessing. Maybe Austin would be strict too, I don't know. But who can guess? Okay, here's another, you might have heard this is just kind of famous for Tolkien. He was always kind of upset about this. The next paragraph, he says, "As for any inner meaning or message, it has in the intention of the author none. It is neither allegorical nor topical." He's always got mad about this. It's not allegory, right? And he kind of unfairly tried to say that that Narnia was allegorical, and it's not really, not in the specific use of the word. He goes on, though, and he's a little combined, but then he says something more helpful. Go on to the next page, the paragraph that begins, "Other arrangements could be devised," boom, boom, and he says, "But I cordially dislike allegory in all its manifestations." An allegory means literally, this equals this equals that, like Pilgrim's Progress. But this is helpful. He says, "I always have done so since I grew old and wary enough to detect its presence. I much prefer history, true or feigned, with its varied applicability to the thought and experience of readers. I think that many confuse applicability with allegory, but the one resides in the freedom of the reader and the other in the purported domination of the author." So he's like, I don't want to force anyone reading on you by making this an allegory, but by making it have such richness and levels of meaning that you can apply it to World War I or World War II or whatever comes. And he's saying that gives more control to us as the reader. It's not like we're being forced into one kind of reading. And he's not. So it's not. I mean, there are certain things that are autobiographical, like we already said, Mordor and all that. Now, I don't. Only if you're a Tolkien fanatic. There is one story that Tolkien wrote that is allegorical, and it's called it's called Leaf by Niggle. I don't think any of you have read that. We've heard of it. It's a short story he wrote. It's this guy that keeps making the same leaf. It's Tolkien who he talked about the mythology he was writing for England was like a tree, growing and branching and different things. And this little guy named Niggle is always niggling away at things. And then he dies, and he's actually in purgatory and is allowed to continue making the work and finishing his tree and stuff. And that's actually more autobiographical and allegorical. But this is not like that. Again, we can apply it to certain things. There are certain themes and all, but it's not like I said, the ring is not the atom bomb. It's not like that. There's not a one-to-one correspondence. it's playing on all different things. And we can make connect. Just like if you watch Game of Thrones, you can connect it to the War of the Roses. And that's probably intentional partly, but it's not just the War of the Roses. There's a lot of other things going on and whatnot. Anyway, okay, let us turn now to the beginning. The prologue on page 1. I just love the whole opening sequences of the Lord of the Rings, the first movie, Fellowship of the Ring. First, the great pre-credit sequence, but then the long sequence in the Shire. Right? Look at it says. It's the third paragraph. Hobbits are an unobtrusive but very ancient people, more numerous formerly than they are today, for they love peace and quiet and good-tilled earth. I just love that. So Stacy, May, when she gets married, she might, as she's walking up, have da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da, the music of the Shire. Just love that. It's beautiful stuff. And da-da-dee-da-da-da-da. And you do realize one of the reasons that's so beautiful. You remember from Bible study? Where did he steal that from? Da-da-dee-da-da. Yeah, this is my father's will. It's the exact beginning of This is my father's will, which is a similar sentiment to the Lord of the Rings. And it is love of the earth, of place, of things like that. And yeah, it's just beautiful. And I'm sure he did it. I mean, I never saw him say that, but it's the same thing, that opening phrase. And I guess that's public domain. It's an old hymn. Right? But just the idea of good-tilled earth. These are people that are close to the earth. And the British are like that too, especially back then, even less now. A well-ordered and well-farmed countryside was their favorite haunt. They live close to nature, but they've made order out of nature, right? They're not in a sense noble savages living in the wild. They have, England is the place of gardens, right? Gardens everywhere. And when you go to England, even the bees are more gentlemanly. Bees are everywhere in England because the flowers are everywhere, but they don't seem to sting you. They're like gentlemanly British bees if you get to go there. Anyway. They do not and did not understand or like machines more complicated than a forged bellows. You know what a forged bellows is? Why do you have to do that? Good. I always love that. Fire is like a living thing. It actually needs air to breathe. If you can suck out all the air, the fire will go out. That's why sometimes if there's a giant fire, they explode something in the middle of it, sucks out all the oxygen, and it dies. I just think that's so cool. Fire is living. Fire is alive. Forged bellows, a water mill, or a hand loom, though they were skillful with tools. Even in ancient days, they were, as a rule, shy of the big folk. And they were good, it says later, of disappearing swiftly and silently. I bet you're kind of like that. Yeah, I bet you can just sneak away. My daughter was like that. She called her the blue ghost. She used to have this blue jacket, and she would just disappear. You scare Wesley a lot? Your mom, you sneak. What are you doing? Well, you just grunt or something. Tell me you're there. It's so funny. Very, very sneaking up and stuff like that. Anyway, it's beautiful. They have a close friendship with the earth, it says. Wonderful stuff. The next page, on page 2. As for the hobbits of the Shire, with whom these tales are concerned, in the days of their peace and prosperity, they were a merry folk. They dressed in bright colors, being notably fond of yellow and green. But they seldom wore shoes, since their feet had tough, leathery soles, and were clad in a thick, curling hair, much like the hair of their heads, which was commonly brown. And if you watch the movies carefully, they spend a lot of time on those feet. Oh, man. And if you listen to Merry and Pippin, the actors, they're complaining because they would spend hours on the feet, and then there would be whole days when you never saw their feet. It's like, these poor people. Never be a creature in the movie, because you're like 3 hours in the tent, starting at 4 in the morning or something. It's hysterical. Just go in there, act, and leave. But this is what we love, all of it. And the round doors. Any of you want a round door in your house? Did you do it? That would be enough if... Get in there. I mean, that would be enough to accept a marriage proposal if the guy promised to make you a house with a round door. That might be enough, It's just a cool concept. I can't believe nobody's done. I wonder if anybody's done it. Like in America or anybody. I wonder how architecturally sound it is. I don't know. But it's just beautiful. Oh, that's right. You mean in New Zealand? You haven't been. I think I met somebody that's been there. It'd be nice. Nowadays, your first pilgrimage is to the Holy Land. Your second pilgrimage is to New Zealand. Because that's not only Middle Earth, that's actually also Narnia, because they filmed much of Narnia there. So New Zealand is the new promised land. You gotta go. Is to where? New Zealand first, okay. The Holy Land. So look, I just love the description right there. Faces was a rule good-natured rather than beautiful, broad, bright-eyed, red-cheeked, with mouths apt to laughter and to eating and drinking. Laugh they did, and eat and drink often and heartily, being fond of simple jests at all times, and of 6 meals a day. Can somebody rattle them off? Elevensies, that's it.
Elevensies.
Would you live that way if you could?
Absolutely.
You would. Okay, it's good stuff. Keep snacking along, all that sort of stuff. It's wonderful. It's great.
J and chips just sitting here.
That's right. Supper, dinner. Yeah, I can't remember them all. They just rattle them off. Oh, there we go. Oh, there we go. Become lunch. And then, so what we call dinner is supper? What is what we call dinner? Is that supper? That's supper, okay.
I mean, lunch and supper is...
I mean, in the old days, like in the Mediterranean world or Mexico or something like that, you have your big meal in the afternoon, you have your siesta, and you go back and some of them, like my friend, he actually invited me to his house again, crazy guy, French guy, and when you go to his house, you eat dinner at 9 o'clock at night. It's like, how am I supposed to sleep? But they do that a lot. My son lived in Greece, we went to school in Greece for a semester, and he said, later, one night, he said, we ate at midnight. It's amazing. It's crazy. Can't be good for your digestion, but they do that really late. Do they do that in Iran? Yeah, they do that there too, don't they? Yeah. It's like, take the siesta. What's that? Yeah. Yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's wild. I don't know how you can sleep.
Late at our house, because everyone has schedules after school activities.
There's just a lot going on, so you have to you eat between 7:30 and 8:30.
This family eats late. There's not a schedule.
Oh, there's not a schedule. They just.
My family dinner's at 6.
Oh, right there. Boom. They ring a bell? Did they ring a bell when you were a kid? No, no dinner bell.
You either come or you don't eat.
The food is thrown in the center, and if you're not fast enough, here we go. Oh, man. Anyway, the next paragraph, just before the space break, and by the way, if this is the first time you're reading it, one of the fun things about reading it is the way he has those little space breaks. It just makes for a nice reading rhythm. They're always stopping. There's no subheadings or anything, but it's because the feel of this book is walking in stages, and they never stop walking. That's part of his World War I experience. Walk, walk, walk. You're in the infantry. You walk, you march, you march, you march. But there's something about the rhythm you get into it, which is really, really nice. Right? I mean, come on, anybody that's a bookworm, right? We want to read at night, but we want a stopping place. And if there's no stopping place, we keep reading. Right? That's why you hate reading something with super long chapters. You can never stop. So here, there's almost every page is a place to stop. Put your bookmark in there, and you better have a bookmark, because you don't love books if you bend it. Don't do that. That's cruel. Now there you can feel that. Yeah. Oh, you're like, yeah, you just have to get there. That's why, maybe Chris. The other ones are going to graduate. Chris, you'll be in there. When I teach my class on Ovid, you had Hobbit. Ovid's Metamorphosis is written in a way that it's one unbroken story. Like there's no place to stop. Even when you get to the end of book 1, it continues on, and there's never a place to, and you go insane because you don't know where to stop. Remember that? It is cool. It is impressive. It's the best transition in the world. Move. Yeah, that's right. We did. You were in the class too, and I did it. It just never stops, weaving and moving, and it's the weaving metaphor, kind stuff. And then it's called Ovid's Metamorphosis. Yeah, we're going to only read that book because we're going to be doing mythology, whole class of mythology and art. Are you graduating in May, Marcy? Okay. Oh, okay. So you're almost there. That's fun. I will be turned on. I got to meet Kevo. Kevo? He's a pretty cool guy. Talk to him. He's got a really cute daughter, man. She's great. They're Nigerian, so I said, So I said, so are you going to be a nurse? Because all night he said, no, I want more than that. And I said, you want to be a doctor? No. And he's like, tell her, I want to be president. I said, okay, go ahead. It was really funny. She's really cute. She's like 7, but really, really bright. Anyway, her name is Africa. It's kind of pretty. Yeah, it's Africa. Anyway, before the space break, it says, and the world being after all full of strange creatures beyond count, these little people seemed of very little importance, but in the days of Bilbo and of Frodo as heir, they suddenly became, by no wish of their own, both important and renowned, and troubled the counsels of the wise and the great. Modern critics who make fun of Tolkien say it's not well written. It's extremely well written. His turns of phrase are just unbelievably powerful and beautiful, and they're like old-fashioned, but they're not just old-fashioned. It's not just like some King James or something. I mean, it's a cadence all of his own, and they troubled. That's a good one, majestic. Troubled the counsels of the wise and the great. It's all coming to this moment, all coming together here at the end of the third age. Wow, good stuff. Let's learn a little bit more about hobbits. Let's see. Let's turn to page 5. Yeah, page 5. It says about them. The hobbits, the paragraph starts, 40 leagues it stretched from the far downs. The hobbits named it the Shire. And Shire is an old English word, okay? And you just think about this. Who is in charge of a shire? Is a shire if? Or how do we pronounce it? Sheriff, as in Sheriff of Nottingham, right? So that is an old actual British designation, the Shire. It's a place. So they named the Shire as the region of the authority of their thane and a district of well-ordered business, and there, in that pleasant corner of the world, they plied their well-ordered business of living, and they heeded less and less the world outside, where dark things moved, until they came to think that peace and plenty were the rule in Middle-earth, and the right of all sensible folk. They forgot or ignored what little they had ever known of the guardians and of the labors of those that made possible the long peace of the Shire. They were, in fact, sheltered, but they had ceased to remember. Now, do you know what these guardians are going to be called? What's that? Go the Rangers. Good. You're right. That's the full name. You're right. They are the Dulac. They're the leftover people from Westerness, from Numenor. But they're the Rangers, okay? And I love that because Texas, right? Rangers. Not just the team, right? But there are Rangers, right? They call them the Rangers. Oh, good. Yep. Yeah. But is that us? Are we spoiled? Have we forgotten? Okay, the people that protect us, that are out in the margins, watching over things. I mean, so we can become what's the word? Complacent, I guess would be the word. Like the hobbits, they're good people, but maybe they've gotten a little bit too small-minded. Maybe they've forgotten what needs to happen for them to be protected. Right? And I published an article a while back about, in praise of those who protect us. And I was talking about military and policemen and stuff like that. And said, like the Rangers, we kind of forget that they're out there. And then we want to, attack them and stuff like that. But we're lucky they're there watching us, okay? They've got our back. And it's sometimes you need a little shaking up, right? Because we've been so sheltered, so spoiled, and we end up being not too grateful anymore, right? We accuse them of being a disturber of the peace. Who do they call the disturber of the peace? No, well, Bilbo is. Well, yeah, I guess you're right at the beginning, but here it's Gandalf. But you're right. Bilbo does become that. It is because like I said, many times I've hosted where we watched the whole 12 hours Lord of the Rings in one sitting from 4 to 4. It's a religious experience, but the part that if you've really watched it brings a tear to your eye, because in the very beginning of the movie, when Gandalf comes into town, he's on the cart, and Frodo meets him, and you see that the old guy sweeping, and he just wrinkles his nose like that. Look at him, and then when they come back after they've saved the world, he gives him the same look, and it's like, it's just nothing changes. Nothing changes in Nacogdoches, which is actually where your fiance is from. It's great. I usually would make fun of Nagadoches because it sounds like a podunk town. But I guess it's really not that small, is it? Yeah. Still pretty full. But I just, when I saw it, I said, what a great name, Nagadoches. That just sounds like a perfect way to make fun of. I'm sorry about this, but when I grew up in New Jersey, they're like, if the guidance counselor, who are the most useless people, by the way, in high school, but they would tell us, if you don't do well on this test, you're going to have to go to college at Cream Puff U in the back hills of Kentucky. That's what he said. Cream Puff U. I know. I just remembered that when I was a kid. Cream Puff U in the back hills of Kentucky. I don't know. Anyway. Where that came from. It's amazing, man. Didn't I tell you I grew up in New Jersey, my first image of the South? Was I telling you we were talking? It's Foghorn Leghorn, man. That's what I am. I say boy. I say boy. That's my first image of the South growing up. Foghorn Leghorn. Hysterical. I love that guy. And there was, does anybody remember there was a ride at Six Flags? It was a Foghorn Leghorn. It was just a little kid ride where they, the cars, and they whip around and they go. And if you push the button, he'd say, shake your tail feathers, boy. When I just my kids were on the ride, I kept pushing the button. I loved Foghorn Leghorn. And but remember that? Did you ever go there? You remember that? It was the little kids part, You're right. Well, first of all, Houston itself is so diverse, God forbid we have more Californians here than Texans. Anyway. Ouch. Watch out for those Californians. Anyway. That's true. See. Northern California or Southern? Well, what do you do? Anyway. I love that place, man. I visited my friend in Bakersfield, and every day we would drive to L.A. to do the sights, and you have to go way up the mountain and all the way down the mountain every time, back and forth. It's amazing. Gosh. Anyway, okay, where was I? So, nevertheless, I jumped down to the bottom paragraph. Nonetheless, ease and peace had left these people still curiously tough. I mean, the Hobbits are the heart of this. They really are the British people. Like I said, these simple people, most of them simple people, and yet when they were in danger, they rose up and they defended not just their country, but Europe, right, and the world. And some of you, if you've ever read the funeral oration of Pericles, he said of the Athenians, our love of luxury has not made us soft. We can enjoy life, we can do this, and then when we need to be tough, we'll be tough. We don't, even though my family's from Sparta, we don't have to live like the Spartans, who are living basically in a camp all the time. Right? We can live and enjoy. Now, these are not cultured in the sense of high culture, but they have simple joys, simple pleasures. And you know what? If you like simple pleasures, there's not too much the bad people can do to you. Right? Just simple pleasures. Right? Just enjoy simple pleasures. Anyway, but they were, if it came to it, difficult to daunt or to kill, and they were perhaps so unwearyingly fond of good things, not least because they could, when put to it, do without them. I mean, they love their 6 meals a day, but when they have to tough it, they can. It's unbelievable how tough these hobbits are. And they could survive rough handling by grief, foe, or weather in a way that astonished those who did not know them well and looked no further than their bellies and their well-fed faces. Though slow to quarrel, and for sport killing nothing that lived, they were doughty at bay, and at need could still handle arms. They shot well with the bow, for they were keen-eyed and sure at the mark, not only with bows and arrows. If any hobbit stooped for a stone, it was well to get quickly under cover, as all trespassing beasts knew very well. Watch the movie carefully, and you'll see many times where Merry and Pippin pick up rocks, and they're dead shot. They don't even need a slingshot like David, they just throw them. The movie picks up on that very well. Boom, boom. By the way, you'll be happy to know in the book that after Legolas shoots a bunch of people, Tolkien actually said, and then he went and gathered back the arrows and put them in his. We never see that in the movie. The quiver never runs out. Like in all movies, like the cowboy's gun, never runs out of bullets. It just keeps going and going and going. Anyway. Okay. Oh God, there's so much beautiful stuff about these folks, right? They're the house. They got the round windows and doors. Look at the very end of that section on page 7, just before it says concerning pipeweed. It says, the genealogical trees at the end of the Red Book of Westmarch are a small book in themselves, and all but hobbits would find them exceedingly dull. Hobbits delighted in such things if they were accurate. They liked to have books filled with things that they already knew, set out fair and square with no contradictions. Okay? I mean, that, C.S. Lewis wrote a book called The Discarded Image, which is about the medieval sort of cosmological model. And that's what he says. The medievals loved to take everything and line up. I mean, the best examples of that are the Summa by Aquinas, all of philosophy and theology all lined up perfect. Dante's Divine Comedy, where everything is, and even to a certain extent, Canterbury Tales, where every type of person finds his way into that group of pilgrims on their way to Canterbury. So that's a little bit different than us. They love this. Okay, I guess the closest would be to boys particularly who just they love their baseball cards. They just love memorizing useless details. Now were you like that maybe? You're like, okay, you weren't a tomboy in that way. Just the love of memorizing useless information. And my son, we made him so happy. You all say this when when I have kids, I'm going to try to get into the stuff they like and really support them. And I really tried that, but I just couldn't figure out how to play that stupid Yu-Gi-Oh game. I tried.
He called me and it was like, Dad, I've got so many new ideas. Can I tell them to you? I said, no. What? I've got a bunch of ideas. I said, no, I'm tired of your ideas. I want you to show me something that's cooked. No more half-baked ideas. I was like, you bring me something that's cooked, that's done, that's got salt and pepper, something that's completely done. I don't want to hear any more. He was like, dang, Dad. I was like, nope, you're 22.
Oh, 22? I think he's on to a kid. Okay.
I was like, I'm tired of hearing about all of what you're going to do. That's it. He was like, you're serious? And I was like, I am being serious, son.
In my head, I was thinking like a similar.
I know, this was great. I love it.
He's 22.
That was a good build up there. That was took us by surprise. Well, I mean, like I said, I really tried to play Yu-Gi-Oh. You ever try to play? I can't figure out, but I was a good daddy. So I would just take his cards and I would say, I'm this person, and Alex would give me the defense points, the offense points, every single number. Yeah, exact defense, all that. And he loved it. Boys just loved the memorization of useless information. I mean, I guess girls memorize different things, styles or whatever. But what's that? Twilight. Oh, Twilight. Okay, yeah, there we go. Yeah, that sort of stuff. They've got their obsessive stuff too, I guess. But I mean, this is the Hobbits. They love that sort of stuff they already know, put together, all that sort of stuff. I mean, in some ways, Tolkien fans are like that too. We love all the. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, you understand? They published 12 books of the history of Middle-earth. And they all, I don't know if they were bestsellers, but they all did well. They were published by, what's the word? Like popular publishers, not by academic publishers. I mean, there's soft covers of them. People, they're all just, very arcade and things like that. People love to get into this world. It's so real. Pipeweed, there we go. The pipeweed, it's just great. Look at page 9. Kind of mentioned this before. It says, of the ordering of the Shire, and then the second paragraph says, the Shire at this time had hardly any government. Families, for the most part, managed their own affairs, growing food and eating it occupied most of their time. In other matters, they were, as a rule, generous and not greedy, but contented and moderate, so that estates, farms, workshops, and small trades tended to remain unchanged for generations. There remained, of course, the ancient tradition concerning the High King at Fornost, or Norbury, as they called it, away so north of the Shire, but there had been no king for nearly 1,000 years, and even the ruins of King's Norbury were covered with grass. Yet the hobbits still said of wild folk and wicked things, such as trolls, that they had not heard of the king, for they attributed to the king of old all their essential laws, and usually they kept the laws of free will, because they were the rules. They kept the laws of their own free will, in other words, because they were the rules, as they said, both ancient and just. Okay. Does anybody know what ancient British document became maybe even more important for the American founding fathers than for the British people? And it's still important to them, particularly if they're more conservative. You know what I'm talking about? Magna Carta, okay? And Magna Carta, I think I gave a lecture on this way back when. Magna Carta itself was able to be based on the sort of old traditional rights of the English. They were able to go back. Most of them were not written down, but they were able to go back to those laws. And that's really what America was born in, that kind of law as well, that we can go back. We're not going to be the French in the French Revolution who threw everything out and reinvented what justice means, everything else. We're going to follow. This is what the Hobbits are. They are the good British folk. And again, it's ironic because when we, Americans, when we broke away from the British, everything we did in breaking away from the British was because we were better Whigs than they were. Okay, I mean, we were following the Magna Carta, and we were in that same tradition. That's why our revolution wasn't really a revolution. You might call it a colonial secession. We didn't throw out everything and start over because we still considered ourselves in that tradition of Magna Carta. And we just, what was it, 1215. Yeah, because we just, about 5 years ago, I remember we celebrated the 800th verse, and I think the Magna Carta itself was on display, I think, in one of our museums, with all its seals and stuff like that. Really big deal. But that's what we're getting at. And you might remember in the first day class I mentioned this word, subsidiarity. That's the old Catholic understanding of sort of social justice. Subsidiarity means you do things on the smallest level possible. Right? If you can do it in the family, you do it in the family. If you can do it in the church, you move out. You don't start big and move in. You do things on the small. And to me, that's true conservatism. Because I mean, obviously conservatives don't like big government. But if you're a real conservative, you should also be suspicious of big business. Like you believe in free market, but you should be suspicious of big government, anything that's bureaucratic and faceless.
I think that's what it's Saruman. What's it called?
That's the new one by Rod Dreher. Yeah.
I think that's what he talks about.
Mm-hmm. That idea. That's the older idea, and you work from that. And here, this is the old idea. Here's a word that's attacked a lot today. Patriarchal. Right? Patriarchy. That's just the word for father. Pater, right? Patriarchal is kind of what you see in the patriarchs of Genesis, where, in a sense, the father is the sort of priest and leader of the whole family. Is your father a good patriarch? No. No? Maybe your mother's in charge. But you're in charge. That's kind of a Jewish way to do it, right? But this idea that they're their own little unit, and we're not going to be pressed together and things like that. That's what he's getting at here. So again, conservative, but that's not the same thing as like Republican. Okay, it's more. It might be a little bit closer. I might have mentioned this before, but had any of you ever heard of Wendell Berry? Mention that name. You said you heard of him? Yeah. He was they often use the word an agrarian today. Somebody that wants to get a little bit closer to nature and things like that. And actually, that guy Rod Dreher that you just mentioned, the book that made him famous was called Crunchy Cons. Crunchy conservatives. These are the new conservatives that are all into health food and granola and stuff like that, which is kind of funny. They go to Whole Foods and things like that. This is a new, but it's an older, rooted thing. Where it's like where mom is basically an herbalist or a witch in disguise. Is your mom an herbalist? Again, all those essential stuff. This idea of being close to the earth, of all that. This is kind of what we're talking about. And Lewis and Tolkien both fit into that kind of thing, right? So, like I said, they would not have been, liberal for a big government. They also wouldn't be super Republican either when they're too much into big business and things like that. And they would be upset by the huge growing gap between rich and poor. They would not be, redistribute wealth, but they would be, kind of annoyed at how these and I think I said this to you before, both Lewis and Tolkien, Chesterton, they like to think of themselves as English rather than British. They weren't anti-British Empire, but your real allegiance is to the smaller side, okay? And really, get away from all the other rhetoric, all the other politics, all of Trump's, craziness and stuff like that. When it comes down to it, there is a strife going on now, and in our country it's the whole Trump thing. In England it's what's called Brexit. You know what Brexit is? When they exited from the EU, right? It's the difference between love of your country first and a kind of globalism that joins everybody together, right? That's part of it. There's all other things I won't even get into, but you see it in Russian literature, where Tolstoy or Dostoevsky was what they called a Slavophile. You know what the Slavs are? Those are the sort of indigenous Russian people, or Slavic, like their language is Slavic, right? And he wanted to keep that tradition and not just become another part of the West like Peter the Great did. We don't want to just be joined in some global, whether it's global big business or big government, right? We want to be ourselves, right? And of course, like I said, that can become a sort of, scary nationalism, but that's not what it's about at the core. And like I said, Tolkien and Lewis are about that. It's about doing it in a love of country, love of place. I think we said before, Robert E. Lee was going to join the Union because he believed in the ideas, but he ended up joining the Confederacy because his state of Virginia went that way. And he put his loyalty to his state above his loyalty to the bigger idea. And again, so you have a series of loyalties that start with your family, maybe move to your church and your community, and you move up that way. And that's kind of what. And sometimes the Hobbits can be very provincial, because we still use it, right? And sometimes they can be the funny provincialism that I don't. Were you ever out in the countryside in Iran, or only in the cities? There's more because you'll see that in Iran. You'll see it in Greece, where the different villagers they don't hate each other, but they don't quite trust the people from the other village. Okay, you see it right here in The Hobbit over and over again. The joke I said, my grandmother, who loved everybody, if you asked her about the people in the next village, she would say, "Well, they're good people too." Anything like that in Kentucky? Yeah, I mean you can still see it. Like this sort of traditional thing, and sometimes it can lead to real stubbornness, right? But there's also a hardiness and a strength and things like that, right? And that's what we're getting. He's trying to get to the soul of England. England itself broken up into all its little shires and things, even at the time when he's writing this. And the way, you see a little bit of it even in Downton Abbey, right? Again, well, I know about those boys from that next town over there. You can't trust them, So it is funny and it's provincial, but there's a love of place, right? A love of place that's stronger in the South than in the North. Right? How does Gone with the Wind end? What revelation does Scarlett O'Hara make? It's all about Terra, right? It's about the place. It's about the soil. It's about the land. And she heard what Katie Scarlett O'Hara, never give away Tara. It is your land. It's your place. She's picking up the dirt. It's that sort of a thing, right? That's what we're getting at. It's hard, but he captures it. He's explaining it here, but he captures it. And you need to understand that I'm glad that the movie made sure to go slow in the beginning. I mean, it dropped Tom Bombadil, all these things. You expected that. But it still spent a lot of time in the Shire for a big Hollywood movie. And why? Because we need to fall in love with the Hobbits. Because this is why we're fighting this war. Okay? Lewis said that somewhere. We're fighting this war so that I can work on my own land and build my own things in my house. And if that's not what we're fighting for, then wars are not worth it. So that I can just live. And it's funny because Lewis even said something you see in America, right? It's like, I just found out that somebody cannot cut down a tree in his own land to make a tool to build a fence without getting 5 permits. Right? This insanity. Okay? That's what drives them crazy. Okay, they want to hold on. So we need to understand what they're fighting for. Right? That's the horror of when a war becomes so total. Right? If the war is even drawing in the wives and children, then what are you fighting the war for? Because you're fighting the war so you can go back to your family and have that closeness, right? But when everything gets sucked in, as it did more in the 20th, what they call total war, when everybody's dragged in, there's no place to go back to. What exactly are we fighting for? And this is this sort of stuff. Okay, look at page 11. Right here. On page 11, here's an example of what I mean by this providence idea. That it's there again and again. If you start looking for it, you'll see it all the time. So it starts with of the finding of the ring, and at the end of that first paragraph, he's retelling the story about how Bilbo got the ring from Gollum. But look at the end of that first paragraph. It says, and so it happened that Bilbo was lost for a while in the Black Orc mines, deep under the mountains. That's under the Misty Mountains. That'll be Moria when we get to here. And there, as he groped in vain in the dark, he put his hand on a ring lying in the floor of a tunnel. He put it in his pocket. It seemed then like mere luck. What is the movie that says, I've lived in this land 100 years and I've never seen this thing you call luck? What is that? That's from another movie. I can't remember what it is. Or is it Lord of the Rings? It'll come to me. There's some.
Albert Einstein said
Oh, what?
coincidence is God's way of saying mysterious.
Oh, that's pretty cool. That was kind of out of the blue. That was kind of cool. I like that. Einstein. I love that. Man in there, see? That was unexpected. I like that. Say that again. Coincidence is God's way of being mysterious. Was it?
God's way of saying mysterious.
I like that.
Albert Einstein.
Anyway, again, it seemed like, but was it? And then look all the way at the bottom of the page. Since he was lost in the dark without hope and could neither go on nor back, Bilbo accepted the challenge, and they asked one another many riddles. In the end, Bilbo won the game more by luck, as it seemed, than by wits. It's always there. There's something deeper going on behind, right? Behind the scenes. Wonderful stuff. There's so much we could talk about here. Pity stayed his hand. Let me skip that. Let's go ahead to the beginning. The prologue, right? Any of you want to live to 11-1? Stuart Morris is 101 right now. Will he make it to 111? He's 111. I'm 11-1, right? Yeah, 11-1, right? And see this is you see, yeah, he's 111, okay? And Bilbo is 33, right? When the Hobbit comes of age, right? And so when you add it together, you get 144. One gross, like a baker's dozen, 12 by 12 or something. One gross. What's that? 12 square, right? We get that there. And he keeps playing with the numbers and things like that. And again, it's amazing that in the book, when the book starts, Bilbo is 33. And Gandalf is like, I'm going to look into this ring. And he doesn't leave the Shire until 17 years later. I'm glad they changed that, because this way you don't think that Gandalf is an idiot. I mean, what the heck? What took you so long, man? Come on, this is ridiculous. But anyway, but he wants the numbers, because Frodo is 50 when he leaves, which is what Bilbo was when he went on his journey. So really, in the movie, Frodo's a little bit older than... I still think they made a good idea to have, a younger-looking Elijah Wood. But he is a little bit older. And I don't know if you realize it, but let me see, I think if I get it right. In the book, he's 50, and Sam is about 35. And Merry and Pippin are younger, too. And actually, Faramir is the same age as Sam. They're both 35. It changes the dynamic a little. But I think it was okay to have... they're so young at heart anyway, that I think it was okay to have a younger-looking actor. But they tend to... Oh, there we go. I see. That look at Clinton's face.
You had an unmasked to sneeze? That defeats the entire...
That's the guy trying to defeat the purpose of the match. You see, aren't you glad you took this class? They're great characters.
sneeze into that. Then you keep your stuff. He turns around. Takes the mask off. Routine.
Oh, right here.
I love it, man.
That's like a doctor like
Clinton.
like pull up the glove and being like,
Clinton's on a roll. You're missing it there. Anthony and Paula, you're missing it. Clinton's on a roll. Oh my gosh. Anyway, so coming of age, okay, his birthday party, a long expected party, right? What is it? No trespassing, no knocking, only on and then look at page 29 when he makes his famous speech, which of course they keep in the movie, as he's getting ready by the tree, right? And he says, I just love this, the very bottom of 29. Indeed, for 3 purposes. First of all, to tell you that I am immensely fond of you all, and that 11 years is too short a time to live among such excellent and admirable hobbits. Oh, wonderful stuff. And then he says a great line. I don't know half of you half as well as I should like, and I like less than half of you half as well as you deserve. This was unexpected and rather difficult. There was some scatter clapping, but most of them were trying to work it out and see if it came out to a compliment. Which I think it does sort of come out to a compliment if you twist it around in your head. Right? Yeah, it's sort of wonderful stuff, right? He's having so much fun. Right? And he goes on, and you know, like I said, they're so lovable, but they're also stubborn. They're very provincial. I mean, he doesn't whitewash them. You know, these are wonderful people, but they can be really curmudgeonly. Good country folk. I mean, it's kind of what we're talking about. Good country folk. And but they'll do anything, right? They've got your back always. They can be what is it? Let's see if anybody can identify this line. And we're so gosh darn stubborn we can stand touching noses for a week at a time and never see eye to eye. That's from the Music Man. That's the River City, Iowa song, right? They're like, and then he says, we're glad you're with us. Welcome to the picnic. You can have your fill of all the food you bring yourself. Right? But then at the end, we'd give you our shirts and the backs to go with them if your crop should happen to fall. Right? I mean, they will come together. They'll have all these little fighting, but then they'll come together and do things. I mean, these are real people we love about the Hobbits. Right? And then here's something that I think it's odd they left out of the movie. It's on page 32. Near the top, page 32. Okay, if you notice, when Bilbo disappears in the book, there's like this flash. What happens? And I think it's really smart because we find out later, towards the bottom, it says, hello, Bilbo says, I wanted to catch you and have a few final words. I suppose you feel that everything has gone off splendidly and according to plan. Yes, I do, said Bilbo, though that flash was surprising. It quite startled me, let alone the others. A little addition of your own, I suppose? It was. You have wisely kept that ring secret all these years, and it seemed to me necessary to give your guests something else that would seem to explain your sudden vanishment. That shows. I'm surprised they didn't keep that in the movie. But maybe it would ruin the special effect that's so cool when he just disappears. But Gandalf is worried, right? Don't let people know about this. He says, you would spoil my joke. You are an interfering old busybody. But I expect you know best as usual. I do when I know anything, right? And he's ready to go in his journey. We'll end with one of the best metaphors in the whole book. I guess technically it's a simile. That you can never forget once you've heard it. That he's starting to feel old, he says. About 2/3 of the way down 32. He says, I'm old, Gandalf. I don't look it, but I'm beginning to feel it in my heart. Well preserved indeed. Why, I feel all thin, sort of stretched, if you know what I mean. Like butter that has been scraped over too much bread. Isn't that wonderful? So simple, but it's just the way you feel, right? And we find out later, we'll talk about this more next time, but we find out later that people that possess one of those rings, they live longer, but they just exist. They don't grow. They just go on, right? And we'll talk about this more. But to me, that's what would have happened if the angel didn't stop us from going back to the garden and eating of the tree of life. Because in our state, if we ate from the tree of life, we'd be like Gollum. We'd get more and more worn out, and we'd be like a vampire or something, the living dead, a mummy, or who else are the living dead? werewolves and zombies, right? These are all Dracula, the Frankenstein monster. They're all undead things. Oh, good stuff. We'll dive in and jump in and artists be thinking about your project. Oh, I'm going to get that painting. Is it in your room? Oh, I'm excited. And let me close this up.